to the prestigious School of Law, Golden Gate University, San Francisco, where he earned both a master's, LLM, and a doctorate degree in law. As at 2008, he returned to Nigeria and joined the Faculty of Law, University of Benin, as a lecturer 1. He rose from that rank and was appointed
of investigation and prosecution of crimes. Definitely, because you find that many criminals get away in Nigeria because of this here, I will convict any accused person unless the prosecution is able to be accused. Am I right, Lord? And therefore, you find many cases where you as a layperson, the prosecutors, I'm glad yesterday that many law enforcement officers were here, and I hope that they'll continue to be part of this, because they will improve their skills in investigation and their skills in prosecution in order to stem the tide of increased crime in the society. Number 3. Expanded career opportunity as a specialist investigator. See, what I talked about that in crime investigation is the enforcement agencies to engage the services of forensic scientists or crime analysts. You see, in law enforcement, you call them either crime scene investigators or crime lab analysts. Failure to properly investigate a crime usually results in the inability to provide credible evidence, particularly murder cases. I'll tell you a story quickly. A friend of mine who is a judge told of this very pathetic story of a man who was brought to her court. And the man was charged for murdering somebody in the market. And they brought the man and they charged him out for murder. And she was there listening to all the case. A t-shirt that was blood stained. So they brought it to court and said, this is the shirt that we arrested him with the day he killed the woman in the market. And the judge was listening. And everyone was listening. And that was all. A shirt with blood stains. Can you imagine? So it's one thing if the man had admitted that the shirt belonged to him and that the blood was on his blood. Then he said he didn't know where that shirt came from and he didn't know how the blood got on the shirt. The prosecution succeeded in bringing somebody who testified that the shirt was worn by the man inside another spot. So, they convinced the court that, okay, that was an inner t-shirt that was on. But then the question of the blood, which was very critical. The man said the blood was on his blood. Prosecution said the blood was his blood. Or rather, it was the blood of the victim. Whatever. But there was no forensic evidence to certify whose blood was on that shirt. So who do you believe? Do you believe the prosecutor who is alleging that the blood belongs to the man, or do you believe the accused who is denying that no conclusive proof of the source of that blood, which was the primary evidence against the man? So, okay, which this science will teach you and certify you, there are many opportunities for a specialist investigator because you cannot analysis will definitely be sought by many lawyers and many governors. A further opportunity, career opportunity as expert witness. In so many cases, there is need to call an expert to come and testify as expert. The court will invite you, pay you, the lawyers will invite you, pay you, and you come to court and testify as an expert. As an expert witness, and therefore you have a career. We have quickly run through some of these games, and there are so many others. But the point of the matter is this, that you can't travel as much as you used to, you can't attend social gatherings and functions as you used to. You can't be here without upside down and bear so much, because there are so many benefits that we can derive from this science called forensic science. If we continue and specialize in this field and begin to capitalize on some of these gains which COVID has brought to our lives. So in conclusion, we have highlighted how COVID pandemic has resulted in great economic disruptions in Nigeria and the world. Despite these disruptions, we have also articulated some ways in which forensic science has gained from these post-COVID-19 era disruptions and challenges. And that's what we now get to the point where we look at some recommendations. Recommendations. Number one, we recommend that our National Assembly should enact a law or amend the Administration of Criminal Justice Act 2015 to incorporate forensic science in the criminal justice tools. Okay? So that's number one. Number two, there should be introduction of forensic science in the postgraduate curriculum of the faculties of law in Nigeria. I propose postgraduate because I believe that undergraduate program in law should take care of the basic law courses. And therefore, a better grounding of the law will serve us well if forensic is introduced at the postgraduate level, because that's the area, or rather that's the level of specialization, and that's where it will make better sense. Number three, we also recommend the assistance of judges that forensic science should be employed in the investigation and prosecution of heinous crimes in order to prove a crime beyond reasonable doubt. Number four, the acquisition of forensic equipment for the law enforcement agencies. We need to start developing forensic science departments in our law enforcement agencies. There's no way we can continue to pay lip service to this because the need is increasing and we must step up and meet these challenges in our society. Number five, aggressive training of the law enforcement officials in the science of forensics, particularly the investigators and prosecutors. I'm glad, like I said, that many law enforcement agencies are here and they are already being trained. Hopefully, we can train them and they'll become trainers in their different departments and agencies. And we will now continue to expand the knowledge of forensic science. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for your time, for your attention. I will rest at this point.
Any question? I have a question. Yes. I have a question. You talked about the domestic violence and rape. It has always interested me to know the provisions for the law in Nigeria, rape within marriage.
Rape within marriage?
Yes.
Rape within marriage?
Yes.
In Nigeria,
like I sue my husband for rape. Sue my husband for rape. Yes.
What is it?
No, my kids say.
Okay,
well, not too much.
In Nigeria, there's no rape within marriage.
That's what
Just apart. You know, the issue of rape is premised on the lack of consent. Let me say it categorically. Rape arises when there is lack of consent in sexual relationships. Therefore, if there is consent, then you can't sue for rape. If there's lack of consent, that's when rape arises. Generally. Now, you know that this is a very tricky one. When there is husband and wife, legally married. In fact, there's a distinction. Between a violently subsisting marriage. What do we mean by that? Women are still married, and they are still in marital harmony, marital peace, right? And there's also the distinction where, and now remember what I said earlier, COVID locked up a lion and a lioness? Remember I said it. I used that card. And you know that there are situations where people are married. They are married legally, but they live as a lion and a hare. That's what I mean. In that case, you can see that there's no more marital harmony or peace. Am I right? Am I right? They live like roommates. They just cohabit. There's nothing marital about them. The man doesn't eat her food. She doesn't cook for him. They don't sleep in the same bedroom. They don't have anything in common. She makes her money, she spends her money. He makes his money, he spends his money. He gets up and goes. Am I right? Am I saying what we all know? Now, is it not obvious that in such a case, that if that man sneaks in at night and tries to do something, will there be consent? No, there won't be consent. Because there is no more marital. It's like raping your neighbor. Am I right? Am I right? So, in summary, once there's lack of consent, there could, or rather, there will be a justification for it. But when you're marital harmony, when you're marital harmony, it will flow like a river. Is it not so? Is it not so? Consent will be found like a river flowing. In fact, it may be the man that will actually grant the consent. See, every time we talk about consent, I keep telling my students that don't think that it's only the woman that gives grants consent. There are times when it's the man that will give consent. Honey? Can we come up with that one, right?
Thank you very much. But I also have a comment about before the next one.
Prof, I'll go away later. First and foremost, I want to appreciate Prof for that wonderful presentation. Short, concise, straight to the point. You see, the rape case or the gender-based violence matter is a very tricky one. Most of it. Yes, you are going to say Harvard. I know. Why am I saying so? In the case of something like what happened in the Bible, the case of Joseph and that king's wife and others, how does the man in law court actually get some form of, claims too? Because with the National Assembly, the kind of law they are passing right now at national level, where they say the lecturer, you cannot talk to a student, you can't befriend a student, you can't do this at all. What if the female student harasses me? There is nothing like that in any constitution. What happened? Is it that it's not possible for a female student to also harass me? That's one. Then the second one, I got a recommendation. I think the number 2 or 3, where you said that if we are using forensic into law, it should be at postgraduate level. Also, and thank God you are there. For us, part of this workshop is that it is not enough to talk and just archive this information. We can actually see how we can work together and implement some of the things we have discussed. And for that alone, I will not hesitate in the next few weeks to do an official letter from our center to you to see whether we can work with you in partnership to getting this thing to your postgraduate school in your own place. We can start this by this and others. Very, very important.
Thank you very much, Prof. I started by commending you, I will end by commending you. This man is a progressive director and professor. Progressive. You see, progress is just thinking beyond today. We can all speak and we all go home with our certificates. But what will be the societal benefit of this conference? And that's what he's thinking about now. And I'm glad I proposed that, because yesterday we had a conversation. Let me start with the second proposition. I am willing and I am going to make out my time and my services available and partner with you at the center, and we will develop a curriculum. We will develop a curriculum for forensic science for postgraduate law students. We will introduce that in university, which is my parent law faculty and my current law faculty, and we will continue to disseminate that good news, because we need it. In this 21st century, a good lawyer must have some level of background in forensic science, and particularly trial lawyers. You know, that's going to be a new skill for a good trial lawyer, that there must have some exposure in forensic science. So I'm willing to partner with you on that. On the first comment, I think that's a comment. And you all know that the law is always biased against men. Yes, it is. The National Assembly has made that law about lecturers and professors. In fact, it's so funny because, like you say, there are cases where some students, and I don't know how to explain it, but this generation of students, they're in their own world. When I was a student, and I was a student, how dare you proposition your lecturer or your professor? How dare you? But you have cases now, and I'm not going to personalize it, where students will write you love letter. Eh? You are so cute. Who taught you that? How do you tell your father he's so cute? You know, you're talking to your father. And the point I'm making is you have all this. I'm not saying that there are no bad eggs, but I'm telling you the other side of the story where you have, they will write it. They will send you WhatsApp messages. Eh? And what do? What do you do? Because the men have been labeled rapists. And that's why I teach my students. Don't you always think about rape, that it's only the man that can rape. Remember consent. Consent is what? Consent not from the man. Consent. The law says consent or lack of consent. It can either come from the man or from the woman. Therefore, if a woman rapes you, consult me.
Please, another round of applause to our professor. Good one there. Yeah, a very good one there. Thank you very much. It's just unfortunate that Prof is going, because I also wanted to ask a question that
if your wife rape you.
okay, there's no need that they say there's no need, so we'll leave you for that day. Thank you very much. To continue our program, ladies and gentlemen, to take the next plenary session, please join me as I most welcome Professor Ernest Osas Ugyali to take his presentation on the topic forensic science investigation of COVID-19 pandemic, measures and solutions.
Professor Ernest Ugyali is a professor from the Department of Social Work, Faculty of Social Sciences, University of Benin City. His research area and teaching interests have been gender studies, law, and social policy legislation, youth welfare and community development, social theory and analysis, social work, and social advocacy. He holds a PhD in Development Studies of Yambo University, ECOMA, Masters of Social Work, MSW, in Social Work and Masters of Science, MSc in Industrial Sociology and Labor Relations from the University of Benin City. His Bachelor of Science as Sociology and Anthropology from the University of Benin. Anthropology and Bachelor of Law from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. Diploma in General Agriculture from the University of Ife. Wow. Okay. Now, Obafemi Awolowo University, Ife. He has published over 64 publications in learned journals within and outside Nigeria. He is happily married with children.
I really appreciate my lordship here. Other representatives. I want to appreciate our LOC and the members of the planning committee, the students, invited guests, and everybody. You are all welcome. I'm happy that the law professor gave the lecture first. So if I now accuse the lawyers, nobody will take it up with me. Besides, I'm also a lawyer, though I'm not practicing. Because I don't want to lose cases. So it's better. Okay. Our work is on forensic investigation, on a pandemic, measures and solutions. You know, since yesterday, people have been talking, papers have been presented, but they seem to sideline the forensic social workers as if they live in fringe of the forensic science, or as if they are not important at all, which is very wrong. The forensic social work, or just social work, is regarded as the queen of the forensic sciences, because it occupies the apex. As I always said, my law colleagues are taking up with me, those from the sciences, the medical, they are all taking up with me. How the work of the forensic social worker, the work others do or does, may be a nullity, I believe. Why? Because they do their work halfway, drop it, and go the work. Let's take an hypothetical example now. A man, Mr. A, is accused of raping a girl or defiling a girl. Mr. A is arrested, taken to court. The lawyer will do everything possible to make sure he is convicted. And the judge will work on what they present. Just as my colleague said just now. In order to avoid miscarriage of justice, try not to give the benefit of the doubt to the prosecutors. So the person will go, or he may be convicted. Suppose that man is convicted, has he solved the problem of that little girl that was defied? No, they haven't solved the problem. Even the man going to prison, what happened to the family that he left behind? What happened to the children? What of the psychic on his own? When you eventually come out of the state of the prison or detention or correctional institution and the corner, what happened to him? This is where is blind to all this. We have said it before. The forensic pathology will come back up and say, oh, this blood or whatever belongs to this. The other one will come, the security will do their work. But that does not solve the problem. The problem that has to do with that little care, the man and the society, is just only relocated. You move the problem from one family to another. That child will remain in state of discord for life if care is not taken. It is not work on. It's these measures are not taken to regard that girl and restore dignity and belief in humanity. That girl will grow to become a problem to herself and to the society. The man also will come back to become more hardened. Most times, we know that people go to the prisons to learn the trade, not to be reformed. So this is where forensic social workers are very, very vital. In all areas, you name it, with the security, the lawyer, the judge,
people, the pathologists, the family at community level, forensic social worker must work with them. Otherwise, they will only do part of the job, send the person to court or whatsoever, and the problem will remain and continue to circulate within the family, within the society. Okay, now, a lot has been said about COVID-19. We all know the damage has done to our psyche, the damage has done to society, economically, socially, politically, and that. We know what happened. We know the challenges that we face. We don't want to go into that now. But during these challenges now, the role of the social worker there. In other climes, the North America, Europe, and even in South Africa here, the forensic social workers were part and parcel of every effort, every move, every day of the pandemic. This is because they were the one that were really on hand, that look beyond the law, that look beyond the science, that look beyond what society can see, that go deeper than that. Okay, now in Nigeria, as I said, to say, the social work as a profession has not been legalized. The legal framework is still in the pipeline. It's a pity in 2017, the president refused to sign a bill that was passed by both houses. They said again, the Islam, we don't know how far that is true. It is not sign it. So the professionalization of social work cannot be completed. This is why social workers who work as social welfare officers are always on the fringe, outside the core thing of all this the professional we mentioned just now. Look at the case of what happened in Ibrahim, where that little girl, university student, was killed, was raped to death by the boys. The welfare officer from Ministry of Justice, of Women Affairs, they were involved, and no two of them. They were involved, but they were never reported. Nobody knows their work, nobody was ready to listen to them because they thought they know the two people that were really, the two groups or three people that were involved in the police who were listening to them, the persecuting judge, and maybe they have the judge that will pass the judgment. This is the reason why in Nigeria the social welfare services are still resorting to right from the back because the core professionals are not given the opportunity to do the job. Now let's see the introduction. I have said it before. Forensic social work refers to policies, practice, and so on, juvenile and adult, victim of crime, mental health, homicide, violence, and other social crises. These are endless. So it is not just with the, but where they are very popular abroad is with the juvenile and the criminal justice system. In the criminal justice system, the forensic social workers work hand in hand with the investigators. They work hand in hand with the prosecutors. They work hand in hand with the justice officers. Because they are the one that give them. And I always tell my people, if you go to the front of the court now or law faculty, you see the way they blackball the woman who held the hand like this. The reason behind that the law is equal right and justice. That is what you can see. But there are certain situations that law cannot see because it is blind. As I always tell my students, if you bring a loaf of bread, let's assume it's a loaf of bread, so share it for two people. What do? The law will say share it equally. Because it's blind to certain things, but when the social worker or the equity now come in, when the social worker work with, they will say what are the ages, what are the situations with these two people who want to share the bread. Suppose the boy is 4 years old, the other boy 9 years old. If you share it equally, who benefit more? It is a 9 years old boy, because two of them left home, for example, to school by 7 a.m. they return 3 p.m. and you want to share the bread equally for them. Small boy will be weaker now because the hunger pound will be more on him. So these are the things, these are the areas that for us social worker in general perform their job. For example, if you take somebody to the court now, the prosecutor will only be interested in convicting that person, which is normal. It's normal for them because they are the one, it's their work. But the social worker that will work hand in hand, either with the justice officer or even the prosecutor, to say, look, there are certain things you are not seeing beyond what you see. So please do this, investigate this, find out this before you take decision, so that despite the fact that the person is committed, so that the society will not suffer more. Okay. I will say because of this discussion to how forensic social worker assisted in the investigation during the COVID-19. As I said before, our work here was consumed under other people's job. So, but what we are going to discuss is the ideas of what happened in other crimes, so that it will give us a clue of what social worker will do when the law, the established social profession, is passed into. Okay, now, the coronavirus, I don't want to go into all this, how it has affected over 81 million, how COVID and others, you know the problem it caused. Okay, the lockdown, just as my colleague said just now, the lockdown caused the society a lot. Just as he said just now, it's like locking a lion and lion together. In Nigeria, for example, we know, he said it just now, and I agree with him that the level of rape skyrocketed because it was more than ever before. Crime was more than ever before. In fact, this originated in the so-called NSAS protest. The NSAS protest wouldn't have happened because there was no lockdown before the time. So all these were bottom-up emotions why that would happen. Now, during the COVID-19, those people that were tested, maybe they are tested and to the COVID-19 disease. It was the work of the social worker to accompany those people, the investigation officer, the head officer, in the investigation. This is why in America and UK, which I know very well, the social worker were not the first set of the medical or paramedical personnel that were vaccinated, because they were regarded as those in the front line. So they were vaccinated, but they were always there. Now, in Nigeria, the federal task force initiated case investigation and contact tracing in fundamental activities that become a case with victims who have been diagnosed with an infectious disease. Now, it was his work of the medical doctor will not go to the family to ask how many of you are here, how many of you are here. The work of the social worker in the team, including others, which we now call social welfare officers, that go do the work of providing support to people. And the one that will do the tracing of those that were supposed to have contacted, or those that believe infected, whether directly or indirectly. It was the work of the social worker that will do this through the those that were supposed to be the patients. Now, during the pandemic, health workers and security safety operatives were entirely involved in the case management, investigation, and contact tracing. As I said, priorities were based on voluntary engagement settings, ensuring health workers including a long-term care facility. In all this, broad community engagement was needed to foster an understanding and acceptance of local case investigation. Now, as I said before, when it comes to community work, when it comes to understanding the fabrics of society at the grassroots level, that is the core area of forensic social work. So they were the one that were really involved. They were the one that were holding community, what they now refer to as town hall meeting, but we call it social advocacy. They are the one that gather few people together and the market, in homes, on the street, and others to say, these are what we do, these are what we do. When you see all those banners and others, those people behind the social workers will always involved. Now, the security sector was also integrated with all sorts of criminal activity, as we said before, occasion like breakdown and the hardship. Now, COVID-19 already exacerbated the challenges faced by health professionals. Social worker, or what we call a social welfare officer, family and caregiver, they were always involved. Now, the social worker there, as I said before, a social worker is not a caregiver. A social worker is an enabler. It's a social helper. In other words, while the nurse will help you to treat your wound, you have to wear the gel, the social worker will not teach you that. Instead, the social worker will link you with the agency or other professional that will help you. So during that COVID-19, there were some cases that, because of their number, the medical team or the passport team, they could not identify them, they were not able to read them. But the social worker that will now identify these people and advise them to go to the nearest hospital or nearest health center for training treatment. So that is the goal. They ensure that they have access to services such as therapy, home visits, collaboration, initiation, facilitation, and intervention, amongst others. This is the core calling of the forensic social worker. The social worker will also play and continue to play integral role in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic through direct support to the people, providing as much as continuity of service as possible and responding to demand and expectation from the people. Social workers will also, they are also in a unique position as harmonizing profession, just as we have said before, harmonizing profession to promote disease prevention efforts and to help address anxiety and other concerns that are arising as a result of this public health crisis. So social workers will also play and continue to play a integral role in responding to COVID-19 through direct support to people. Social work practice as a healthy profession has got the use of skill and theory of human behavior and social systems in accommodating and resolving social problems that affect individuals, just as I said before, like psychotherapeutic measures. There is during that NSAS protest. The people that are injured, nobody bothered to advise them to go and see professionals. All they are saying, why do you go there? What are you doing? So and so forth. In talking to those people, the problem will be compounded, and this is why many of them now they are suffering what we call post-traumatic stress disorder because of that shock they suffer, and nobody helps them. Now, the role of social workers encompasses different dimensions of social issues, including, as I said before, tackling of the menace of the challenge of COVID-19. Nigerian social workers are equally doing this activity, that is facilitation, initiation, collaboration, community organizing, and social advocacy. In addition to other bridging of gap, linkages and psychotherapeutic intervention in the lives of the helpless, hopeless, vulnerable, oppressed, and marginalized members of the society. We know that people's marginalized group all over the world, not only in Nigeria. They are fine. The most number one of these files are physically challenged. In most homes, they are eating away. That society don't care about them. Check this place you are about to, if you are planting this surface now. Somebody using wheelchair can pass there. And women, just as the colleague said just now, women are always gathered as vulnerable, so they are gathered as refugees. So these people, they are, you see that this COVID-19 affected these people more than every other group. Vulnerable member of the society. Then also demonstrate using confidence and critical application of professional and medical principles in decision making and practice. Promote and support participation and services their family, victim of country law and practice, and promote and advance wherever possible individual rights and self-determination. Then so we also work out in this context, also work to promote privacy and dignity, recognize discriminating practices and develop a range of bad approaches to the challenges of services including emergency and COVID-19 pandemic. Collaborate, diagnose, assess, and treat criminal and justice system population. In other words, as I said before, we work hand in hand with police from investigation to the conclusion for any social worker and death. But when the lawyer hands over after successfully convicting an accused, he will start come because that is when the work of social worker is completed. They follow the correctional center of the prisons, ensure that they are properly integrated into the system, find out that the problem they are going through, they have, find out their health difficulties, then put in place in context of their peculiarity, what and how such criminals or convicted persons need to be rehabilitated, and they are changed so the law, the labor law are put in place. So in Nigeria, people are sent to prison. We say we have labor. Fine, that is what the law says. But that hard labor, it is the foreign social workers that are supposed to mitigate to come back to become an access to the society. Then the foreign will also identify and diagnose 10 case signs of an abused child. There is no time for that now. Most parents are usually ignorant of this, either because they are pursuing money, or they are too full of themselves, or they are too busy. They don't know, all that they are already knows their children or their children will be abused by a neighbor. Remember, they say that somebody that is sexually abusing a child is never far from that child. They are never strangers. They are usually either siblings, driver, domestic servant, neighbors, or close family friends. They are family. And I told my students, they were shocked. I said, within 5 minutes, it's enough for a man to abuse a child. And the practice will continue. Meanwhile, the parents will not know. The social worker that will help those parents to know 10 the signs of an abused child. As I always tell the students, most important one is that when a child cannot move the eyeball to eye, when a child has not seen bruises, or the child was usually amputated, just for maybe her name is Rose. You know that something is wrong with that child. But some parents are so busy. Rather than look, what is happening, they will beat the child. So those 10 days, it is the help of the foreign social workers that have been decided and help to train, tell the parents, sensitize them, educate them, so that those children will be abused. But then when the abuse is eventually discovered, it is the work of the social worker to bring the child from that shell. Because the moment that abuse starts, children go to war and stress. It's like a fact, cover shock they are going through, and the pain and the trauma. The social worker will build the trust and help them so that at the end of the day, they will come out better. I have a case we are handling now, a married woman. She days now, the woman has a passion to sleeping with the husband. The moment the husband pursues you, will see that, no, this sometimes you shout at the top of her voice. The man was frustrated. They were back taking the woman to psychiatric hospital when the man consulted us. We discovered that the girl was raped when she was 7 years old. That was she told us. 7 years old, by 3 boys along where they said CEFPADS, no, tires, just wax. Because of that, she now entered into a shell. People now thought that she was, what is it called, because of sanctity. No boyfriend, nothing at all, the man said this is the one I want to marry, thinking she was so pure, not knowing that she was suffering big trauma until she entered the marriage and now discovered it was big problem. So this COVID-19 compounded this problem because the man that was always traveling suddenly stayed back at home. And one will do with a month, 3 months, the woman refused the man to touch her until the now consulted the level are working on her. Then coordinating the work of the welfare unit and social welfare association in IDP camp and correctional center. I've said it before. The IDP, when you go there, you just see that within Nigeria, people are living as slaves and as subhuman. So these are some of the victims. Now, in conclusion, COVID-19 will remain one of the traumatizing experiences by mankind and for years to come because of the devastation of the psychological and economic life of people, society all over the world. The battle to contain failure is still on, and social workers have been part and parcel of the effort to spend time of the spread. Social workers participate actively in the prevention, management, measure, control of the epidemic in all nations. In Nigeria, we were not recognized officially because we are still working behind the sun. Okay, we are not using our place. Okay, then social worker and the profession has many problems ranging from systemic to practice environment, especially in Nigeria. Systemic in Nigeria, many people don't believe in social practice environment because don't have the legal backing now to work. So if a social worker is employed in this of just of a women affairs, just he will work as according to the principles of their own, then not according to the principles of the professional ethics. However, it is disposable as social workers contributed immensely to the investigation, management, measure, control, and solution to the COVID pandemic in Nigeria. Okay, thank you. The recommendation of the cut it off. But what I will recommend is our Lordship is here in the pinnacle of the judicial system. We please expedite action on how to legalize Nigeria social work profession in Nigeria to make it official. That is one. More importantly, before decisions are taken, particularly how to do with crime and criminality, social workers should be involved because they are the ones that understand the area. Why people commit and why the judge say men are labeled as rapists, why the society labels men as rapists. So the social workers are the lawyer doesn't know what the society, the judge doesn't know, the security doesn't know, they are only interested in one aspect. So if they bring this professional for this social worker, they have the life profession, their eyes will be open and efficiently they are trained and society will be better for it. Thank you very much.
Another round of applause for our professor, the professor of social work, Professor Okoye. questions while we pass. But before the question, in 2017, we wrote to the presidency that we should withhold his assent from review because they have some they have some clause in the bill that they are objected to. That those clauses must be corrected before the president should assent to the bill. So based on that, they requested that president should withhold his assent. Ministry of Justice, number one, and also Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So those three ministries are the ones that goes now in the committee of the group. So after that, we send back to the president. Just to clear the reason why the president, why the
Well, in Nigeria and everywhere, everything is political. This is politics. Despite the opposition to petroleum industry, what is the president saying? What is the we don't? Only that people don't see the importance of this because they think they are those people that know that they are both. They are not of the friends of society. Thank you.
Please, another round of applause for our professor, Professor N.S. Williams. Any questions? Okay.
I know throughout your paper, mentioned how the social worker is kind of isolated from the investigation process. I was just allowed, is there a way you can approach the police, Ministry of Justice, and have a designated social worker in these two units so that when rape cases occur, because most times what we are supposed to do is the victim should be taken to a hospital to take a swab. By the time the matter gets to us, there is no swab taken. You can't prove anything. And like the professor who left right said, most times the layman is there, oh, this person must be convicted. But at the end of the day, there is no evidence before the court to convict the person.
Thank you. The problem, like, I'm not supposed to say, Commissioner of Women Affairs, the last government, is still working with the president government, contacted me by previously that people are not doing their work. They are not, what they are supposed to do to women that come there, they don't cancel the prayer. They don't talk as if they are pastors. As far as you can. Those things, you put those things in place that you work with, you are looking at that. One, what the social worker is supposed to do is the woman come, you welcome the woman, build the trust. I say, madam, you don't do well. Yes, because of this, okay, I'm taking the doctor. Now I have a commissioner. If there is doctor, you say, there are no things that they can go. He said, no. He said, okay, now, where is the social worker or the welfare officer that they are called there now? Where will they defend them to? There's no place that so far. Is there part of the Ministry of Justice that the social worker can march to, even without mocking the other, say, ah, Baba, you are here, what's the problem? And they will complain, those one will take it on. He said, no. I said, okay, is there any agency, let us be like LAPO. But most of these women that suffer violence and oppression, they are women of the low and the status, the boundary. Is there any law that of government that a social worker can go and say, this woman needs help, give her help, give this 50,000. Because when I did my research, I saw that what a woman rely on in one day, sometimes 2% of the money, that time was 7,000. In other words, the total capital of the woman in the market is 14,000. That woman will set up the master, feed her family, and life goes on. And after a very day like that, she now starts saying, I love Nigeria, where the money they find. So if you need here, if things are put in place, for example, abroad, our director if somebody goes to hospital abroad, especially US, and say, I want to see a doctor, they won't let you see a doctor direct from a right. They will take the last day psychologist or a social worker and call the worker in hand. By the time you know, they talk with you, because it's not the medical issue, it's emotional or social. They will not advise you to take care of the right son. But in Nigeria, there's no place like that. So I think there's a place like that. Anytime there's a great report, wherever the social worker is, call the social worker. Because apart from taking all those vital, the social worker is the one that will work on family, the one family that is poor, the poor girl that is abused, the man that is also already the landlord, the social worker is but there's no like that. So I wish people like this are up there. I have come to thank you much.
Thank you very much. Lastly, in that ministry of government, we also employ qualified social workers. That ministry. Politics, yes, because I'm the president and the vice chairman of social workers. We on our own thing. We discovered the staff in that social welfare department. In fact, they only have one qualified social worker. All of them, they are educationists, they are lawyers, we call them quacks. But because of they refuse to let go. We are ministries of government, the civil service, the channel civil service, up to now, in Norwich. So we are not doing well. It is because of the quality side that is there, and that is why we are seeing our problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good day, commentators, and dignitaries, and my colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Regarding the services of the social worker, I'm close to the Edo State Ministry of Gender, the Gender Ministry. It used to be Women Affairs. Mr. James just mentioned only one qualified person. That's my niece there. Yes. In their presence, a woman who drags her husband to the ministry, to be cautioned, to be admonished. In their own presence, the man will be beating the wife. Yes, the man will be beating the wife. They try as much as possible to say, okay, be giving her 10,000 a month or 15,000 a month. The man will tell the commissioner, I'm not giving her anything. I won't carry up my job to carry. So things like this, we need more of the social workers. They are almost feeling like this with jobs. Anything comes up, yes, this is not the Wila come and handle this. And this is a girl in her text. She's even complaining that have more professionals, not just posting people from the other ministry in the civil service. You have more professionals. Then these men speak up. You are dragging a man. You are in your presence, the man you are cautioning is even saying, Madam, you are not concerning me. Now we know whether I will take care of them or not will take care of them. They will not carry. So it's not fair. Please, social workers need, the service of social workers need to be appreciated and to be employed more in that ministry. Thank you.
right? Dumbfounded. My own personal experience in social work and the issue of women. There was a time in 2016, I wanted to adopt a child. Like, I felt fully adopt a child. And I went to family that was the person that came to my mind. And I told me I have to do this. It turns out that they have like campus among Oh, notice that. There's like a cover or something that prevents people from adopting children because the owners of orphanages use the children to make money. Yes. They feed off organizations, churches, and all of that. And whenever you say, okay, let me take this burden on you, have 2, 3 people that will actually adopt children. And then when they tell you, very good, this is the money thing, and then they just explode the matter. I didn't even know that thing was bad. I was like, okay. So, really, you have.
Thank you very much. That's a comfort, Madam. Madam Case. What you said now, we very well said. The problem there is systemic, just like what you said now. I know all of them. They all kind of time to send our students to the orphanages. They go field work and all that. No, okay, they are but if you now who is just very serious and all the time to do this paperwork, and somebody don't come to my brother and say, I'm giving you $6,000, what will you do? So it's systemic. So we are there, that's all our honorable justice. People don't name the person, I don't want to say her now. The woman in charge of the school is carrying his head. She said, man, she don't do her best. She's really paying that things are not working. If you want it to work, the justice ministry will be involved, the police will be involved, the minister of finance will be involved, then the investing, I don't know whether the constitution of this or investing, where these children can be set up. Where all these are involved, it's like the lecturer is still have a class now. You don't know which class to go. Then you don't have a class to teach. So if the social worker is okay, like what that's what the department she could whether what you just said that in the presence of the social worker, the man will be grateful to have something that has big fear, something will happen. If the system really working, all you need to do, fine, you record it and say, okay, I can come. The police will come, use of justice will follow, and take him to court so that in 2 hours. You will force to back and nothing is happening.
Thank you very much for that. I know about all the government
was getting that
if they have already accepted one property, you are in bed, you are not just prepared for you. You are on the globe. You go to every site and the self-offender section. Self-offender section, all you see there, those people who are involved in one form of sexual violence or the other. And when they are looking for people to wake up, they will send their post to their information to people without people, their email, social media. Social sex offender is from the video file or whatever. It's coming to them. They call. This is the picture. This is how it looks. So that information you know keeps our being checked. Because you know that even if you guys are because I have this law, you know that I do. So if a man manifests anger anywhere at home and he feels that because he knows CP, he knows to verify, and therefore he cannot do what to do, we stigmatize him. And once you stigmatized once or twice. Even if family don't tell you, this is your shame, you not get married, you are all over the radio, television, social media, that's one. So I think instead of applicability, more to apply things for what they are of referral. That referral is anybody who is sexually abused. We are ready to take the statement to the vagina. Provided you are not your own let them know that within 72 hours, we must ensure that the government will come and make statement. Then two, whoever is the person being investigated for this, should be made to pay for the statement analysis of the CSA. There is no need. There's a case I'm having right now. We've already gone to Oko prison. We went there to take sample for the man who has been in prison since. Incidentally, the boy who is a product of the rape right now, is about 5 years. And incidentally, that man is a senior witness. I don't know how many of that girls are pregnant or have it for him. So he has multitude of them. So for such a person, keeping in local prison for me doesn't help so much. Stigmatizing. I'm not sure who is local prison. Or if you said another. Nobody knows. Because after few years, you get a lawyer who is defending him. He goes out of the court. He speculated, he rapes another person over and over and over and over. But when stigmatization comes, because you know what the damage we are doing by allowing them walk the street. Let me give you an understand. The Director of Education told us that a 9-year-old girl just to go and watch the younger brother who's about 4 years was fighting with his thing on her own vagina. So when they come to the bedroom, he slapped the hell out of her. Why are you doing this? That uncle director that he taught me how to do it. So I'm doing this. Because the trauma is cyclical and it goes to so many generations. One, the kid who has been traumatized, gets to a state, begins to enjoy, he feels the norm. And when some of them marry, they manifest it, start like feelings or something. They have a desire of behavior. Then some of them, whether men or women, because they have grown to thoughtful relationships. I saw a woman the other day who was going to show me that. I want a man who can beat me. After beating me, make love to me. Is that woman normal? She's not normal. No, that's what I'm saying. So we are working on character. We need to actually have a checkpoint mechanism. That checkpoint mechanism is first and foremost, one, is radicalize all those so-called criminals. Then another one is there's a manufacturer that I don't need to mention the job. You go over to that say that I know about 3.something billion to put that in this street. Why? Because many of the part of police are pedophiles. And because they are pedophiles, when they went to mind to abuse them, instead of those parts at home, say they were totally abused. And when they were nobody to tell them. So the government took it as a normal thing. So for many of those rapists, those who are abused, yes, they have a problem. Very strong problem. In as much as they want to treat the victim, even the culprit need to be treated. Because I don't see why, even for little things, you exhibit your anger to just certain level. I want that anger without people to check. I don't know for people to self-anger assessment. The self-anger assessment is online. It's a great way. Determine your anger level. On the scale of 1 to 10 and another, what is your anger level? Anger level with yourself, with your neighbor, with even your environment. Because some of you think that anger is just something. The first thing to treat is anger. Once we are not able to deal with anger, then we are getting here dealing with this sexual violence and that. Because many sexual violence people, it's just matter of, okay, you did not take it by force, whether you like it or not. You understand what I mean? And they can come with all kinds of excuses. So it's a very, very serious issue. And I know that people like you that we can begin to talk about it. How to stigmatize those people. Stigmatization issue is check. It's like somebody who is doing other because of alcohol. Everything has an accident, that's a terrible police. By the time you demonstrate to him that alcoholic, it's a trouble. I had a cousin. I got this one very clear example before I got the man. Chain smoker. You are taking to church to visit Dr. Herbert. Stop this. You are wasting all your money on smoking. You might refuse to church. But somehow by divine intervention, something happened that led him to church. There was one particular man. He thought an robber had come to their house. Had some unusual noise in the kitchen. So he tiptoed to the kitchen and was fine. And so that he slapped me what he wanted in the kitchen. What my family do in the kitchen at this time of the about 2 cases? What was the family do? Doesn't have about 2 or 3 days so that people smell it. You can't empty the dustbin on the floor of the kitchen. The whole dustbin, everything was there. What's he looking for? He's looking for the top of cigar and smoke previously. Because he had no money to buy again. So he was taking the top, sat down on the floor. He will take one. So the other child sat by the door looking. He will take the first one, smoking, do not. So the minute the guy saw the way he was picking top from dustbin smoking, come and see the good people over his body. God, I'm going to this level very soon. No, you don't want to have to stop it. Few days later, I saw him. On that, what happened? No, I'm not just smoking again. I'm just smoking again. So sometimes you need to focus on to get involved. Thank you very much.
Very much.
That's how we follow. I don't mind even beg me to help out.
Most of the time, not able to take for that maybe during the program, thank you very much. We have the honor and privilege to invite to the podium Mr. S.N. Momo to deliver a paper on the family citation in local bakery in forensic implication. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The Vice Chancellor, management, the Center Director, our Justice, our Lordship, the professors here present, senior colleagues, members of the LOC, I cannot start lecture without appreciating the Center Director who founded the place, and today we are benefiting from it. My lecture this morning is going to be very brief and concise. Lecture on toxicity of potato products, utilization in local bakeries, and the forensic implications. First, the outline. Go on. Is it? Okay, sorry. Okay. This is my outline. Introduction, definition, production itself, industry fashion, bread and other baked foods from flour, methods of baking, and health hazards. I will talk more on health hazards of those of us that consume bread and eat products. Okay. As we all know, bread is considered to be one of our staple foods in our homes. It cut across the whole world. We use it worldwide. Bread is very nice. We take it and it's produced and taken all over the world. But I want to say that bread is taken in Europe, Africa, Southeast Asia. It has high nutritional value with comprised of dietary fibers and vitamins such as vitamin D and folic acid. It contains large amounts of minerals such as phosphorus, magnesium, calcium, and potassium, while sodium, iron, and iodine are available in smaller units or quantity. The elasticity of bread or bread dough is usually owed to the presence of protein with the protein, and it is also its ability to trap that
result in its rising. How to in the past, observation of bread processes is usually done by exposing the bread to air. You leave it for a very long time before it's wrapping. The purpose of the use of chemicals such as potassium bromate and other chemicals is to hasten the wrapping of the bread. In other words, to make it wrapping for its rising when you expose it to it. Potassium bromate, as you know, is a very simple powder that it looks like milk powder, is whitish, colorless, and if one is not careful, you can take it for powder milk. I want to define some of the terms. Toxicity. When we talk about toxicity, we define it as the degree to which a toxic substance may have the organs of the body. While toxic substance is that substance that can cause damage to poison tissues, which means it possesses a chemical nature that is harmful to health or liver that it can kill if consumed orally. Like if potassium bromide is taken in excess, it can cause death. The substance can be said to be a toxic or a poison substance, depends on the concentration, quantity of that toxic substance taken. This is a white, the potassium bromide, as I said, is a white powder like that of powdered milk, and it can be mistaken for powdered milk. It has oxidizing properties. It helps to oxidize bread, setting the dough, that is the bread, the flour, when it is prepared. In the past, the oxidation process was carried out by exposing the dough to an open air. As I said earlier, when you expose this to an open air, bread is exposed to air in those days, it takes a long time for it to wrap it. And after wrapping, you process it by exposing it to heat. And in the heat, it helps to rise it. But to fast track the gravity, we now use potassium bromate. And in 1990s, potassium bromate is banned all over the world, except 2 countries, that of India and America. In America, some states in America have used bromate in a very small quantity to wrapping their bread. The same thing in India. But in the preparation, they always tell you put in the label potassium contains bread. The purpose of that one is to tell us that this bread contains potassium. It's level to take it or not to take it. But however, in Africa and in some countries, especially in Nigeria, we find out from research that over the whole country, potassium bromate is still being used in preparing bread. And they tell you potassium-free bread. But I'm telling you now that a work done by Amin and Eto in 2015 in Abuja, for that matter, they collected some bread and analyzed it and found out that out of all the 20 samples they collected from different things, all of them contain potassium. And I'll tell you, to get to the implication of that. Why are they using potassium bromate? Because it is cheaper, very cheap, and it is widely available. Other additives are not very common and they are expensive. Evaluation of potassium bromate dated back to 1964. They were using this in 1964. But by 1990, the World Health and Food and Agricultural Association came up to ban the use of potassium bromate. In 1986, the committee accepted a minimum of 75 parts per million as ppm with a provision that negligible residues in the end product with understanding that all bromate is converted to bromide, which is usually my politician. Further studies by a committee in 1992 revealed that potassium bromate is toxic and carcinogenic, and alternatives were suggested, such as the International Agency for Research on Cancer, ARC, in 1999 classified potassium bromate as possible carcinogenic to humans. By 2012, the Codex Alimentarius and International Safety Reference Agency, and this brought about the ban of potassium bromate in our bread or in our food. Based on the report in 2012, many countries like Europe Union, China, South Korea, Sri Lanka, Canada, and Australia, Brazil, Peru, and Colombia, with Nigeria missionaries just to measure but a few ban the use of potassium bromate. In India and US, as I said earlier, they are still using potassium bromate up to 50 ppm, that is part per million. And in making their flour, but US allow up to 75 ppm, and manufacturers more potassium bromate is used in making your bread. So there are other additives that will help also rounding the bread, like bread powder, for instance, contains sodium carbonate with acid, while that plain soda does not contain acid but purely sodium bicarbonate. Alternatives to potassium bromate, ascorbic acid or vitamin C is considered a better option. Ascorbic acid or vitamin C can be used. In 2015, glucose oxidase was also introduced to help in grafting of bread. These are mild, they are simpler, better, but they are better and they are not as poisonous as that of potassium bromate. Other food Papers and flour agents by law are ammonium sulfate, ammonium chloride, and amylase. These are substitutes for potassium bromate. Alcohol and industrial version. What happened is this: in the year 2015 or 16 rather, an issue came up. There was an issue that came up then when Maggi was produced. They found that Maggi contains a certain level of mercury, and mercury is a trace element. And because of that, when they announced it, the CSE, that is Central State Examiner, announced to start taking the industry into consideration, they were not looking at all. Something happened. What happened was that they were very active, and they told the public, the CSE, for publishing that without bringing it to their knowledge, because they know that when we do that, it will affect. The same thing as we are talking about potassium bromate, we are going to see some bread. I'm not going to tell you the names of some of those bread that are that contain potassium bromate, even though they are telling you they are potassium bromate free. Most cases they are not potassium bromate free. Bread, as I said, bread and other baked foods. Bread is a staple food consumed washed by, and for production and sale are found both in urban and rural areas, especially in Europe. Africa and Southeast Asia, Bermuda, 1997, and OS 1997, first endorsed 2015. And that report. Aside from potential danger of using potassium bromate, bread exposed with flies, fetching of them, and also rats passing excreta or urine on them are not safe for consumption. So because of that, that idea of exposing bread to air for a long time is not safe. So this processing of bread, the local way of processing bread, you get the materials as you can. Oh, sorry. You get the materials. How to go back? Sorry. Yes. Okay, you see the materials here. From here, you mix them and take them to the mixer. This way to mix them, and from mixing, you ferment. From fermentation, you take it to cutting. Here is the cutting table, and after cutting, you profile. After profiling, you send them to incubators or a heater where you heat it and it comes out as bread. Then start eating. The truth is that during this process, if there is total profit, at this point here, between here, during this competition, it can help to wrapping the bread, and from wrapping, it comes to slicing and profiling, and from there, you have bread. Then you can see the local rural baking and urban baking. The methods of baking of bread are either the rural one or the urban method. The urban method uses machine. While if you look at the urban, if you look at the urban method. Please, let's go back. No, back. No, you are going down. Go, go. Okay, yes. So if you look at this place, you see the urban baking method, which is very, very safe. The handling is better than that of the rural. If you see the rural baking method, it involves the use of firewood, and you can see the person is using ordinary hands. But in case of urban areas, it's also so. Because infection here can be more than here, because here is well taken care of by the machine, mixing and all of that. Then you see the different types of bread. And it looks very fine, but what is contained here can cause one's death. Here we have so many types of bread. Types of different bread, refined bread. If you look at them, they are all safe. They are bromine free. They are all bromine free. But I'm not saying the bromine, don't quote me. I'm just saying that these are some of the breads that are sold in Edo State. So whether they are bromine free or not, until the test is done, just like the judges, so they cannot say until it is proven beyond reasonable doubt. Then here we are looking at the clinical implication of eating bread with potassium bromate. If you look at this is the bread itself and the insects, the potassium bromate they provide. We have the vinegar, we have the effect of the starch, you see the bread here. When it is consumed either by animal, rat, or by man, these are the conditions you will find. It can bring about renal tumor, it can bring about thyroid follicular tumor, it can also result in carcinogenicity, it can result in cytotoxicity, it can result in genotoxicity. It can also increase LDL, that's lipids, low density lipoprotein cholesterol. These are cases that can result from the consumption of potassium bromate. I want to tell us a story. In one of the countries, there were bakery workers, 9 of them, they were preparing to go for an outing that evening. It so happened that they wanted to take a cup of tea before leaving, and they mistakenly take the cup that contains potassium bromate because it looks like milk and they use it like milk powder. And after taking it, they found out that they start having gastric gastritis and start having stomach pain. And before you know it, they ended up in hospital. When they checked, they started treating them based on the presentation, treating them with antibiotics. But antibiotics did not work for them until they started having passing blood in stool. What is this? At the end of the day, they discovered that it was potassium bromate that they consumed. And the effect was that 9 of them came down with renal problems because it causes renal toxicity. The method to identify potassium bromate in bread, we can use the qualitative method or quantitative method. The quantitative method, you can use spectrophotometer or you use chromatography to quantitate. But in case of qualitative, you just get the reagents like promethazine in 2.2 ml ACL. You drop it on your bread. If you see color change from the pinkish color to pinkish color, you know that there's potassium bromate. But if it remains same, you know that there's no potassium bromate. That's the simple way of testing for potassium bromate. Now, potassium bromate as a toxic chemical can be detected at night. It is very, very poisonous. As I said, it is odorless, tasteless. To test it is tasteless, white powder that can be confused with milk powder. It has oxidative property, which is widely used in baking process. Emata Econ 2000. Various methods have been used described for the determination of bromate in baking products. Among these are just as they are listed. I want to also share a simple experience with this COVID-19 during the lockdown. Sometime last year, a legislator bought bread and distributed to the people in the community in Lagos, especially at that. That bread was thrown away. They used the bread to store the man, and it was just designed because we don't know at that point the production of the bread may be as a result of maybe they use potassium bromate, and in the process they saved their life because if they had consumed that quantity of bread, only God knows what would have happened. But thank God that they did not take that bread. And again, there are some of these things of the bread that you see hawking, especially those in the rural areas. You find out that some of them contain a lot of these potassium bromate. Potassium bromate itself is not completely bad. It is bad when it is not oxidized, when it is not heated to the right temperature. If it is heated up to the right temperature, of course, the potassium bromate will be converted to bromide, and bromide are usually very, very mild. Does not affect some of those clinical conditions. However, the potassium bromate is not safe for consumption and it should be banned. All our dough products, like in all our other bread or dough or whatever products. Chicken poison with bromide poison may present with massive hemolysis and neutropenia. In some cases, when they eat this, they start having hemolysis. Their cells, their blood will be hemolyzed and neutropenia. That was as researched by Prokuwa in 1990. The mechanism of action of bromate toxicity is not clearly understood. by Mark Somotos, 1980. But that renal failure seems may have resulted from direct tubular toxicity due to active oxygen radicals, which reduce renal perfusion from dehydration, thereby increase vasomotor tone. Bromide, those are some of the problems that are associated with potassium protein. Children less than 1 to 3 years, when ingested the solution of potassium protein up to 2 to 4, that's 53 to 1 gram, that's 3 grams of 2% solution of potassium protein causes nausea. You see them trying to vomit. So that is why even when I'm giving children breast, you have to be very careful and be sure that the breast is not containing potassium protein. That is why when you see breast, in most cases, you see different types of breast, as I showed earlier. The dark brown one is safer to eat than that is fresh. I mean that white. That white one is not exposed enough to it. And if it's not exposed to enough to it, there's possibility of potassium in it. So, potassium protein, as I said, several things. Their recommendation, I want to recommend to us that it is highly recommended that alternatives to potassium protein in baking products should be encouraged. In other words, alternatives to potassium protein should be encouraged in our baking. Then a task force should also be set by the government and stakeholders. Before I finish the recommendation, I want to also say this. The government, if you look at what happened, like what we are talking about now, the COVID-19 pandemic, is also an issue. During this period, there are a lot of people were locked down in 2020. People were asked to stay at home. So the common food people were taking was bread or baking products commonly. And if these are not well prepared and they are prepared with high concentration of potassium protein, of course, you know the implication of that. So a task force should be set up by government and stakeholders to ensure compliance of the ban of potassium protein in the preparation of bread. Then investigation on dietary habits of high-risk dwellers be included in routine assessment. A center forensic laboratory should be established. Legislation should be put in place to regulate, control, and sanction and importance. Thank you very much.
Please, another round of applause for Mr. Solomon. Yes, please, if you have questions, you can ask now. I'm sure with this presentation, we will not be afraid to eat bread. They will expose us to the type of bread and give us knowledge of how to check if there is gluten in any bread. So with this, I'm very sure there are questions that I want to ask. There are questions next to final from.
That is yet to eat bread now. That thing you say we can use to test it. How do you eat bread?
You want to be very senior, so get professionalism in house. So if you want bread, you can convert us. We'll test it for you. But I think it's a simple method for qualitative analysis. Qualitative, I'm not talking about quantitative. When you want to quantitate, you come to the lab, you take the bread, and the rest is nothing. Run the bread, try it, nothing. And determine the concentration of potassium protein growth. That they see the name in the bread, the potassium protein should then for the qualitative, or
The people online that are asking for this application, people who are watching it, they are not seeing it. So you chat, look at the chat now. What is the chat? So read the chat.
Yes, the presentation on the carbon bonus, which is what is very interesting.
Camera.
But I'm just wondering, for this discussion that we don't go to the next one. And we have agencies like NAFTA. And I don't want to conclude that they're not doing more than this. But part of the problems we have in Nigeria it's not that we don't have policies, but ensuring that those policies are enforced is part of the process. So, what should we do? It's very concerning that you said most of the bread is eaten. Young can have the left of Italian bonnet. But you said that we are allowed the bread baking is allowed to go to a particular temperature. I don't know for how long, how do you ensure that? How do we play safe, considering that bread is one of the most staple foods in our family, on our table on a daily basis? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. And what happened is this. Very simple. The NASDAQ, whatever, the SON, as they call, is supposed to do their work, but they didn't do their work. That's another thing. Because I just give you an example in Abuja. I have not tell you about the one that was done in Kaduna, the one that was done in Benin here, the one that was done in Delta State, even at Enugu, the same type of results all over. So if you go on Google, you see all these results. But the problem is, NASDAQ supposed to go around to make sure they monitor these things. But I don't know, I cannot say they are not doing their work. I don't have that to say they are not doing their work. But however, how do we get, either you bake your bread and use the right material, or you buy your bread and get the car from us and press your bread before you eat. Every time you want to eat, just take a portion of it and press it, whether it's going to balance with it or not. Yes,
Thank you very much. Please a round of applause for Mr. S.M. Momo for a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. We appreciate you. Say that it's Momo, not just say yes. That's a good one. Please, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. Please, ladies and gentlemen, join me as I welcome Deputy Director, Central 3. Join me as I welcome Dr. God Osare Iga to take his lecture on please a round of applause for him to take his lecture on the history of the role of forensic science in fighting against COVID-19. Dr. Igaro is a medical laboratory scientist, holds his bachelor's degree in medical laboratory science, DNLS, engaged on best graduating chemical pathology students in the DNLS class of 2003 academic section from the Federal University of Technology, Akure. He also obtained a master's degree in applied chemical biochemistry. In addition, he holds a postgraduate diploma in education. Hence, a registered member of Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria. He is also a certificate in forensic toxicology from the NMS training lab in Philadelphia, United States, and a director and a doctorate of philosophy, PhD degree in chemical pathology, specializing in toxicology and applied nutrition from University of Ibadan.
Most commonly mentioned words or combination of words all over the world today. COVID-19. People children know it. You know? It was declared a pandemic last year by WHO. And we know the causative agent, the severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus. 2. We had SARS before, severe acute respiratory syndrome, around 2006. That took place in China also. But they don't go beyond China. But when this came, it went beyond China and was exported to the whole world. And here we are with it today. We all know the origin, and history has it already, that came from the Wuhan city, which I think they should have called it the Wuhan virus. Because calling it COVID-19 is killing off the origin. Because I am of the opinion that if a country practices things that are not of public health safety, that country should also be made to face the music. If it is called Wuhan virus today, I think China, because they are competing globally in global commerce, they would have been more careful with their public health practices. We see here that in China, a number of practices that can put the world at risk is still taking place, like celebrating frogs and some dangerous or animals that are not of public health value. Of course, forensic is the science that wants to look at what is not seen visibly. They want to look under an issue, going beyond the physical value of an event, going into a situation or a circumstance to bring out objective findings. Forensic is the revelation of hidden facts. And deploying forensic to COVID-19 is what we intend to look at right now. We want to look at what forensic can do in the fight against COVID-19. I want to also look at the potential contribution of forensic science towards the understanding of COVID-19 and controlling the pandemic. Now, the role of forensic science in the fight against COVID-19. Looking at this outline, like determining the exact cause of death among COVID-positive incidents, contribution of the accuracy of mortality statistics, understanding the pathological mechanism of COVID-19, tackling the presence of the virus over time, so the survival of the virus after death, medical legal issues, COVID-19 charity, the donations, and the policies of Nigeria. With respect to all the donations we have received, I also think that forensic can put a fair light on that. Looking at this as the first discussion, it's possible to determine the exact cause of death in COVID-positive individuals by postmortem investigations. When someone dies and the hospital says this person died of COVID-19, how true is this? The other day, a friend of mine, when we shared the same office, said the uncle took COVID-19 vaccine and no way anybody can argue with them. That this man, he ate the man, he told them before the death. But it was after the person took that vaccine that the person died. And I was like, there's a vacuum somewhere. And keep the record. And I said, oh, Nigeria does not know how to keep record. That we are going to regret this era like 20 years time because of our record keeping life that is not standard enough. Now, if I was to do a comprehensive postmortem diagnosis of an attempt to clarify what caused the death and a comprehensive examination to provide opportunity to assess the constitution of existing comorbidities like cardiovascular issues, metabolic syndrome, other forms of chronic diseases. What is the association of these diseases with COVID-19 alone? And what is the association of these diseases with the vaccine? Because we have two conditions before us. The pandemic, the virus without the vaccine, and the virus with, in case of a group of people that don't have the virus, they took the vaccine. A group of people that have the virus and they took the vaccine. And the people that have the virus and they don't take the vaccine. Do we have records of all of this? And we have a monitoring system, data organization, to help us to look at their lives and we can paint a picture, establish a paradigm in our society, in our public health, to know how things go. So there's a high possibility that we are going to look at today in the future and see that we have failed in generations ahead of us. And another discourse is the condition of the accuracy of mortality statistics. There's a call for forensic medical statistics here. Now, the people that die, and we say there are 5 issues of COVID-19 today, there are 3 deaths, and the deaths actually COVID-19 deaths. Where is the authenticity of that data? Who has challenged it? So put government and public health offices on their toes. We need forensic to answer some of these questions. Yeah, there may be infection with COVID-19. Is it actually the cause of the death? Or they say primary cause of death, secondary cause of death. Is it the primary cause of death? If you say so, if you say the virus is the cause of the death, was it the primary or was it the secondary? All these data were not to be. We need forensic data management. We need to deploy forensic technology into some of these things. It may be difficult to do because even our hospitals, the handlers of our medical care don't even believe what we are saying. We are speaking English in this hall. How many policy makers are here? To listen and say, I take this home to influence policy. I want to tell you that tomorrow, our poor management of data and all of this will give us a cause of concern tomorrow. And that tomorrow is very near. Now, the medical statistics that we have, is there a program today in our healthcare system that put together to say, those that are taking vaccine in those states, there are 10 million, for example. From that 10 million, we have their data of how their health became from the time they took it. We are monitoring. When they come to hospitals, we can just put their name, a database to show. So today, you take vaccine in the Oluku Health Center. 30 after they took you to Central Africa. They discharge you. Another day after the following 2-3 days, they took you to UPH. And we don't have a combined data to show and say this person has to put his name there or has to put his medical record number. Nobody could have a medical, I don't think anybody here has a medical record number. Now when they put your name in UPH, when you visited Central Africa, what they did to you, I wanted you to visit the show. Or when you visited Oluku Health Center, what they did to you and what made you to visit the show, they disjointed the news. I don't think it's a system that is safe. We are in a dangerous environment. Now, understanding pathological mechanism. Now, there's a call for urgent medical team research. I like Nigerian doctors. I like Nigerian pharmacists. I like medical aspects in nurses. But I don't like the lack of teamwork among them. The politics is getting more and more to the extent that we do not put patients first. We put our association and medical societies first in our practice. We are trained to value our unit, our profession, more than the reason for the profession. The reason for any healthcare is the patient. Patient care is the first and primary focus of any medical expert, healthcare provider. By the time we are trained more than patient care, we are not going to have a teamwork. But I want to tell you that for us to understand how COVID-19 affects the liver, affects glucose metabolism, affects the kidney, affects this or that, we need collaborative approach so that when the lab scientists bring their data, the pharmacists bring the data, the doctor look at clinical findings, they will make it together to understand this is what the virus does. But today, there's so much disjointed approach in our team spirit. And any country where there's no team spirit respect in their healthcare provision, they will keep ranking low. I want to say I honor all healthcare providers in Nigeria and I honor their expertise. But with all our expertise, I want to say we keep going down in quality of healthcare. Go and look at the last time Nigeria healthcare was ranked. We were far below compared to many African countries. Sad news. That's what I call that. The team spirit will make us to do some research that will answer some questions and make us gather some important data. Tackling the presence of the virus over time, an expert panel or panel of expert approach is needed. You know, we need the services of the forensic sociologists. We need the services of the archaeology, epidemiology, veterinary medicine. All of these put together will make us to know what happens after the death of the person that died from COVID-19. Will the virus survive 2 days after the person dead, if person died from COVID-19? Will it survive in the corpse, in the body fluid of the person, in the organs of the person 10 months after? We need to take a track record of this. All of these are important in COVID-19 with respect to forensic application. Then of course, survival of the virus after death, I just spoke about that. Medical issues. Are there deaths that are due to operating? Are there deaths that are due to some covert activities that are criminalistic in nature, that are today called COVID-19? Are there mistakes between determining whether this person has COVID-19 and led to his death and a symptom of discovered things that happened to the person and the person died of those things that is different from COVID-19? And when the person gets to the hospital, it is said to be COVID-19. These are issues. Is COVID-19 covering a lot of criminalistic deaths, criminal activity induced deaths? Today, we need that question that forensic should answer, and it can declare forensic properly. You know, my conclusion, it's a global problem. The opinion of forensic scientists are important. We need detailed, multidisciplinary analysis of the situation. It's not a mono-professional thing that can help us at this point in time. The pandemic, it calls for what? Team approach. There's of course, my final thoughts and the way forward. COVID-19 vaccine process technology. With what is happening today, where we are afraid of the vaccine or we are begging for the vaccine, I think that Nigeria, if we are serious-minded, we can look at where our money goes to. The budget of Nigeria, where does it go to? Does it go to the politicians in the national assembly? The someone put in answer rock? Amount of money spent in answer rock, if it's not spent, can you not help us to establish a vaccine production industry in Nigeria? We should organize our expenses towards looking at certain things that are happening today that we can easily do with our level of wealth. I don't think the level of wealth in Nigeria is low, so much that it cannot establish vaccine production process in Nigeria. With this one that we are doing politics and writing letters here and there, visiting developed countries to beg for vaccine, it is not to hit our head that we can establish vaccine production mechanism in Nigeria. Then two, COVID-19 vaccine enforcement. What is the true intention? Is it so that we can have access to foreign loans? So that the developed country can look at us and start for us, and we are forcing our people to take the vaccine? Is enforcement, forceful vaccination, is it part of the issue of mankind? Is it what to be perpetrated to the next generation? These are things you can look at. A forensic approach can be deployed to the Nigerian vaccination system, COVID-19 vaccine, to see if government really love us, that's why they are putting us. Or there is another thing inside. If COVID-19 is the forensic that can help us to detect that. By the time the forensic statement comes up with data, if you know that this is that government is saying that we should take it at all, we should know if you don't take it, you cannot enter. After December, we all of us, they will drive us out of the country, we don't take it. It is forensic data that can help us. So we also look at the question, we also look at the safety. When somebody says, my uncle took it and died, we need COVID-19, we need forensic information to really say that you are lying. Don't deceive the population, the entire population that your uncle took it and died. We need some of this forensic intervention to know all of this, the safety and all that. As I said, it's a call for forensic settlement. Oh, another area that needs forensic settlement is the challenges and the funds that show COVID-19. All those money that they said cannot be paid, where is the money? Okay, if the money has been spent, is there an explanation to the country that we spend it this way? Okay, if they are free that they explain, is there a forensic analysis to know that what they explain is true? Okay, can we always continue like this where everything is treated in darkness? What do we have for our next, our generation, our children to say that please do well, be transparent, have public property, have integrity? When we don't have data to show that we independent have public integrity. When it's for that money they will donate that time. We need forensic, and not the question where is money is not. We don't have data to eliminate anybody, whether local government, state government, federal government, we don't have data. And one of the intention, but we just wanted to be sure that they should be aware that we will ask the question, where and how. That's why we are putting it there. Then, today we have COVID fraud. What you see on some platform or in some countries, fraudulent COVID-19 compensation lottery prize. Man was taken to be on top of the chain and making the patient to have maximum benefit, considering the environment, the animal life and all that. I have a skill for that. Look at the one X approach. X in the environment, human X, animal X, one X. You cannot say, I am an animal X, I'm a veterinary doctor. I don't want to interact with the doctors in the hospital, the medical doctors. You cannot say, I am an environmentalist, working for CMD or CBTH. That's not one X. The world today is going to one X approach.
I never had a very long time. It's a great.
Good morning.
Good morning.
From the United States, I hope you can hear me.
Can you hear me? Hello, Barry, can you hear me? Unmute me now. Can you hear me, Barry? Yeah, we can hear you.
Now I can hear you, Professor Rennie, yes.
Yes, please. I was just letting them know how we met years ago and how you are doing a wonderful friend. And especially the last speaker that just talked before you is one of the staff who made fellowship for you to train on pharmaceutical psychology. You know you train 3 of our people. Ligaro,
I'll call you
who
back.
is a doctor now.
I'll call you back. Come
Then
here.
Apata, who is also a doctor now. Then Professor Wong, who is a professor of pharmacology and psychology. I don't know if you can remember. So then
I'll call you back. I'll call you back once I clear. I'll call you back once I clear.
Are you with me, Barry? Hello, Barry.
Hello.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Can hear you. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, okay, I can hear you. Let me allow you to start your lecture so that we'll talk a little bit more about you later. So you can go ahead and start your lecture, please. Professor Barry Logan, former President, American Academy of Forensic Science, former Director, NMS Lab, Director, Center for Forensic Research and Education, Philadelphia, United States of America. You're welcome. The audience is all yours. Please, to show you the floor so that you will. Thank you.
Okay. Let me go ahead and share my slides. Thank you for the invitation to talk to your group. And it's a pleasure to reconnect with Professor Eddy. We've had many professional contacts over the years. So I was asked to talk about our experience with the practice of forensic toxicology and chemistry during COVID-19, some of the impacts that forensic laboratories have had during the pandemic. So a little bit about the organizations I work for. I work for 2 companies. They're quite different in their missions. The first is the Center for Forensic Science Research and Education, which is a research and teaching laboratory performing forensic science education in master's programs and research in the areas of forensic biology, DNA testing, forensic serology, drug chemistry, and forensic toxicology. And we have about 40 master's students who receive laboratory and classroom instruction for us, as well as performing their own research and completion of their master's degree. So when COVID began, teaching institutions in the United States were deemed not essential. So we had to close our laboratories, our classrooms, and transition to remote learning using Zoom, Teams, which is fine for classroom instruction and lectures, but very difficult for laboratories. So we did what we could with GoPro cameras, and we had the instructors in the laboratories and the students connected via the internet on computers to watch the laboratory, our faculty and teachers performing experiments in the laboratory. So that was not a great experience for the students. It meant that they did not get the same hands-on experience of working with the instruments and samples in the laboratory. And that in turn led to a decline in the number of students applying for graduate programs by the fact that they did not have that hands-on laboratory experience. In terms of the research that our biomedical research organizations were deemed essential, so we were able to continue with our research activities. However, that was only for the faculty and the professors, not for the students. We also had to reduce the number of people who were in the building, so we could only have 5 of our staff in the building at any one time to promote social distancing. And we had to implement a lot of extra cleaning, hand sanitizing, mask wearing, face shield wearing, etc. We were able to use some technology that was very helpful in using a piece of software called Remote PC, which allowed our scientists, when they were working from home on their laptops or computers, to be in the laboratory remotely using this piece of software. Another impact on research was the fact that all conferences initially were cancelled. So conferences such as the one that you're having right now is a really essential part of scientific discovery and learning, where you get to interact with your colleagues, to discuss new ideas, to discuss the latest findings in the field. And it took a while for professional organizations, research collaborations, and ideas, active mentorship, or the ability for professors to help bring new scientists into the field and instruct them in their particular area of expertise. So these were the main impacts on our non-profit organization and our research and teaching organization. I'll spend a little more time talking about our service organization, so our laboratory that performs forensic toxicology and sees drug testing for police, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and courts. So NMS Labs is the largest laboratory in the United States doing this kind of testing for the courts. We have around 400 people in our organization, of which about 300 are scientists. And we do this work in currently 5 locations around the United States. Our toxicology laboratory receives about 500,000 cases from the police, the death investigators, the medical examiner. When COVID was first identified and the government started putting restrictions on people coming to the workplace, there were effects in a number of areas, and I'll talk about 3 of these. The first was the effect on our employees. Their jobs, whether the laboratory would stay open, and just the uncertainty around how long these restrictions would last caused concerns amongst the employees about whether they could have to find jobs, if they could continue to get their salaries. Because other support services were also impacted by COVID, many employees who had to come to work could not find care for their children. Or those affected in their ability to interact, particularly with the elderly. We also had employees who had sick family members who they had to stay home to care for, which I think not to work, they were worried about their pay. There was also a fear of, since the laboratory remained open, and then working beside quite small spaces with a lot of other workers, there was good infection. Many of the laboratories either to deliver supplies, to drop off evidence, or to work on instruments. Comfortable with the amount of care their co-workers were taking to avoid infection, but sometimes knowing so much about it coming in from outside. And there were concerns about the virus being transmitted through packaging or of the samples that came to the laboratory, which ultimately was determined that was not a vector for COVID transmission. And they felt also they were working in a hazardous environment, since they had to come to work while many other people were staying home, and whether they would be receive additional compensation for that. From the management point of view, the priority has to be the safety of the employees, because if the employees are not safe and healthy, the work in the laboratory doesn't get done. So that was a consideration in all of our operations, doing everything we could to reduce density in the building, providing supplies, personal equipment to the employees to reduce the risk of infection. It is also a problem in running a laboratory when you have the risk of a lot of people being sick and not coming to work. The work still needs to be done. And from time to time, we had a number of our employees who couldn't come to work. Obviously, this affects morale and the amount of effort people put into doing jobs. Something that management has to encourage. There were other considerations and challenges, such as the fact that since masks and gloves and disinfectant were being used now by millions of additional people, sometimes it's difficult to supplies in the laboratory. We rely on organizations. CEFPADS is the American Society of Prime Laboratory Directors, and they established their interest about what they were doing to combat some of the effects of the pandemic. And so the things that laboratories did was to increase the frequency of cleaning, to reduce the risk of infection, social distancing by having fewer people in the laboratory, changing work hours, having additional shifts. Typically, laboratories were open from 8 in the morning till 5 at night. Shrinking all through the day, but in smaller numbers. They closed common areas like the gymnasium and the cafeteria, because these were areas where people tended to congregate. And we did things to try to prevent unnecessary additional contact between surfaces. So, for example, we instead of keeping our doors closed, all the doors were closed so people weren't touching door handles. And we instituted a no visit. With great calling on the essential with very simple person meetings, doing all of our meetings and Zoom. Who there were people that was reviewing cases, ordering supplies, working with and we enhanced the use of online systems for meetings such as Zoom. We also suspended pretty much all travel. So typically when employees have to go to court, courts that we'll discuss later close, and we did not send to meetings or conferences outside the organization to reduce the risk of infection. So those are the impacts on our organization. Some of the things that we did to try to reduce the risk of infection. In terms of the impacts of COVID on drug crime in the United States, we did see significant impacts of that. Law enforcement agencies were similarly impacted by limited ability to meet with suspects, witnesses, to avoid risk of infection, and that was a disruption to law enforcement. And other drugs and drug states. So we did see some short-term reduction in the drug supply. However, there was already a lot of drug material in circulation within the United States, as we'll see. That did lead to a surge in drug death in the early months of the pandemic. There was intelligence that DTOs, or drug trafficking organizations, particularly drug gangs that are manufacturing drugs, were also affected by the pandemic, and it's harder for them to obtain the precursor chemicals used to make the drugs that they were distributing. And in some jurisdictions, particularly in Europe, there was a more extended decline. Federal Express or UPS, more drugs started to be delivered by these services because it was harder for drug users to go out and find their drug dealers since there was travel restrictions. Many cities. We also saw some additional evidence of transition by drug gangs to higher the distribution and sale of higher potency drugs that were easier to move. So if you have a drug like heroin, with a certain potency, there are so many doses in a kilo of heroin. But there can be a tendency towards more synthetic drugs in the United States, especially fentanyl. And since fentanyl is about 30 times more potent than heroin, the size and weight of an equivalent number of doses of fentanyl than the same number of doses of heroin. So it was easier to move some of these drugs around. And we saw move away from heroin to more fentanyl. Also because there was a lot more people staying home if you're streets, it became easier for police to spot drug transactions. So these were some few people who were still out in certain neighborhoods. And also money laundering operations and transfer of large amounts of cash became more evident and easier for law enforcement agencies to spot, because in general there's less commerce in legal business dealings. In terms of drug trafficking, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime put out a report that verified a lot of what our experience was in the United States. There were some overall shortages, which led to increases in price for illegal drugs, and the purity of drugs being sold in the street also declined. As we mentioned, drug trafficking by air was almost completely shut down, so a lot of drug smuggling, drug importation moved to container vessels came in through shipping ports. There was also, as I mentioned, the restriction in the movement of international distribution of precursors, which led to some short-term shortages of drugs, but drug cooks and drug makers, drug manufacturers quickly found end of the distribution chain. So while some of these supply issues were significant, just the murders and the ordering distributing drugs. There were significant impacts on ports because the ports also were shut down for a period of time. So judges on a state-by-state basis instituted waivers of speedy trials, which meant that the prosecutors had more time to bring cases to trial. There were judicially instituted exceptions to indictment timing, which gave law enforcement agencies more time to complete their investigation. And almost all trials for a period of about 6 months were continued. Courts did not hold any trials, and that created a big backlog of pending criminal cases that we are still struggling with today. There are still limited capacity in court because of the implementation of social distancing, and there is, and that, by some estimates, may take 10 years to resolve. So very big impact on taking cases to court. As a laboratory, we did see some initial impacts on the volume of cases that would be submitted to us for testing. Not so much in forensic cases, which is the blue line here. This is relative to this is percent volume relative to the highest volume month, the time it was March 2020. So forensic drug cases dropped off for a while, but then after about 8 months have returned to pre-pandemic levels. So they dropped off more significantly because patients were not going to hospitals and have their regular clinical tests done or to have medical procedures done. But however, after about 8 months, clinical volumes had all been with their fear and anxiety because of stay-at-home orders. Who would not use drugs, and they had less access to these programs. Across the United States, we also found in the first 6 months of the pandemic that alcohol sales. There are other factors, the effects of COVID-19, and are more at risk for a fatal outcome than non-drug users. In the United States, we're up from, depending on the organization, 25 to 80% of people contemplating suicide because of anxiety. These are all new and are contributing to our drug deaths. So just to wrap up, again, I thank you for your attention and the opportunity to talk to you today. The impact of COVID on laboratory operations and forensic laboratories impacted the criminal justice system cases. We found
CDN chapter head business development Michael Benin. Please join me as I welcome my brother Omohime Esele. Please, Esele, please. A round of applause for Mr. Esele. While we take our lunch, please let's listen carefully to this lecture. It will tell us about use of artificial intelligence. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. The topic is presentation, use of artificial intelligence in the prevention of loan fraud, default, which complements forensic investigation. A lot of our speakers have spoken about forensic, what forensic means, and what it hopes to achieve. But we are taking a different drive to this topic. We have the outline here, from introduction to our conclusion and reference. Okay. There are different definitions here. But the one that strikes me more is Trend 2012. It says forensic is the application of scientific expertise to the field of law in relation to either criminal or civil actions and involves a wide range of expertise. The experts we're talking about, they have listed them from now, from finance to DNA and all of them. But we will be looking strictly at financial fraud. And our focus will be on loan because it's a microsystem that affects the people, and we're studying the dynamics of this and anticipating or predicting crime before they happen. The cost of forensic or the cost of crime itself, when I mean the cost, we're not talking about the financial cost now, the damages that the crime or the effect of that action would have done or method on the people that go to victim can be everlasting. Not too long ago, 2007 to be precise, we had a banking meltdown in Nigeria. The reason that happened was because there was high level of loan fraud. What I mean by that is connivance. We had, let's look at it. The problem here is the provision for loan default reduces total loan portfolio of a bank. What it means is that before the bank goes out every year, they have provision for loan default or fraud. They will say, okay, we are making provision of 5% of total loans that you are going to give out. You are going to give out 300 million loans at the end of the year. You are taking 5% of that loan. If you do 5% of that loan, what will happen to the bank? 5% of that loan, they have provision for it. Now, there are banks who by the end of the year, have up to 50% loan defaults. Meaning the bank, the interest of that bank, the capital of that bank has been eroded. That's what happened in 2007. A lot of banks went on that. And if banks preempt that fraud, I'm not sure what have gone through that process. It's not only in Nigeria, it happens worldwide. And so, like I said, the loan fraud comes from insider abuse, and this is induced by pressure. You have heard of the fraud triangle. One of the causes of fraud is the pressure that comes from it. Somebody wants money, he does not have the collateral to get that money. But he has thought of it. If I go to XYZ bank and apply for a loan, they will ask me for the criteria, I'll go and fortify these criteria and come and submit it, and I get the loan. So that person is about to commit a fraud. So now, I'm going to explain why AI, actually, is going to complement forensic. Now, if that person has committed that fraud, let's say it comes to your bank and takes 20 million and has committed the fraud, forensic investigation will not start. We have spent so much money trying to get the person that created that or that defrauded that bank. At the end of the day, you might not catch that person. But if the system preempts that person coming in, the act of even trying to defraud the bank is already a crime.
And so that person has already been, before the person committed that crime, he has already been investigated, he has been caught, and can be charged to court. And if he's found wanting, he goes to jail. So we're trying to skip going through the process of doing the forensic investigation itself. The cost of it, preempting it, is even forensic investigation itself. He has said, okay, if we have 100 people in this place and all of them behave the same way, they are coming to your fence, they will have to put a ladder on your fence, climb the fence, then jump in. After some time, that data set has been fed into the system. The system now knows how people who say this area commit a crime. And so it's preempting it. Immediately you try to do it, it will signal the system, and guess what happens? They are caught. So the cost of, like I said, the cost of that crime, the person might come to your house and even kill somebody. So the cost of the crime, that's what we're trying to prevent now. Catching the person before he does it. And so that's what artificial intelligence is trying to do. So, Wilson et al. 2015. So the finance world was left reeling after federal regulators revealed that Wells Fargo is an American company. Wells Fargo employees have created millions of unauthorized credit cards and bank accounts. Millions. A lot of people were defrauded. Let's go down. The same Wilson et al. He said the fraudulent account set up by employees to meet aggressive sales targets were earning the bank unwarranted fees. According to CNN, the scope of the scandal is almost unprecedented. 1.5 million deposit accounts opened, 404,000 credit cards submitted with no consent. This is like what is happening at God Yahoo. I am sitting in my house, I cannot apply for the card. People are doing it. At the end of the day, because we're going to the cost of that crime now. 5,300 employees are said to have been fired because of that scandal. Some of those employees might not even know that this crime ever happened, but because they passed through their tables, 5,300 people were fired. The same Wilson et al. Said the right technology may not have prevented widespread ethical failure, but it would have stopped employees from being able to open millions of fraudulent accounts. So, like I said, the cost of this crime. You are seated here now. Somebody has hacked your phone. You don't know what's happening. But because you have not imputed some certain device on your phone, they will go to your account, they will clear up your account. But now the world is doing what? Has advanced. It's advancing. It's moving very fast. And Africa needs to catch up with it. Now, what is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence is simulation of human intelligence processed by machines, especially computers. Now, what it's saying is this. The human brain thinks in microseconds. But we're saying now that we want the computer to do what? To think faster than that. Preempt it, deal with it, the issue before it happens. Or else, cost of it might be far damaging to the people that it will happen to. And so, instead of talking too much, let's look at the video. Can you play the video? I want to see where the world is going to. So you try to catch up with it. You have kids at home. Please start to teach your children how to program. Because this is what we're going to do. No, first video. Click on it. Okay. There's nothing to do with the second one. Okay, what's really happening now is this. Let me explain. I don't know what's happening to the system here. But what's really happening now is there are already shops abroad that you walk into without, you walk into the shop, you don't meet anybody there, there's nobody minding the place. You just walk into the place with your credit card and you shop. Immediately you lift an item, the system credits your wallet. This actually is going on now. The system credits your wallet, it debits you, whatever you are paying. If you mistakenly take that thing away from there, before you get to your house, the law has sent you a ticket that you are stolen something. It's waiting for you wherever you are. So this is, they are going one step or 20 steps ahead of what's happening here in Africa. Initially, I heard that those days that you go to a place to buy something, there's nobody there, you just pick up, put your car in or whatever you do and take your stuff and go. Yeah. But now this is an advanced way of doing it. So, in artificial intelligence, we have different layers of it. We have what we call machine learning. Machine learning is currently being used to predict crime, whether focus, facial recognition, or project transaction. You are driving to, let's say, Igbo in Benin, and you don't know the place. What you have this on your phone, it's called GPRS. You click on your GPRS, and start telling you, turn left, go to XYZ amount of meters, turn right. It's an artificial intelligence happening. It has preempted, it already knows how that place looks like. It has preempted it. If there's going to be a crime there, where the Americans have moved further and Chinese, if there's going to be a crime there, it will start showing you that there's a robbery going on in XYZ place. If there's hold up, you notice that it's showing a red line. And there's a hold up in XYZ place. Take the authority route. So, this is where we're going to now. Now, for machine learning, we have moved to deep learning. Deep learning is a subset of machine learning, which is a subset of artificial intelligence that enables the computer program to learn from a given data in order to identify patterns and make decisions with minimal human intervention. Recently, in America, it was January, they have been able to use artificial intelligence to preempt bomb blasts. Somebody or who are trying to set up a bomb somewhere. Why should we now, what this paper is trying to say is, why should we wait for the cost of the crime? The cost of the crime, I mean, 1,000 people dead. Why can't we use forensics to preempt the crime before it happens? It might be you, it might be me. And so, they caught people who were trying to diffuse the blow of the place. It was the public place, about 51,000 people moving in and out of the train station. They caught people that were trying to carry out this bomb blast, and people are being persecuted as speak. And so that's what we're saying. So, some people have carried out research on this. Daria et al. 2019. Recent development of machine learning techniques and data mining has led to an interest of implementing these techniques in various fields. Mr. Ether said, the banking sector is no exclusion and increasing requirement towards financial institutions to have robust risk management has led to an interest of developing current methods of risk estimation. And so, see what the machine learning people did. The type of machine learning algorithm used to predict loan default can affect the accuracy score, which will impact in the prediction results. Daria et al. They use this method, but there's a certain level of percentage that they can get to. So, somebody let's go further, sorry. Somebody in India started studying neural networks, because this is the deeper part of machine learning, which that's what we're doing now. Started studying neural networks and found out that the neural network works faster than the human brain. So, but the percentage they got was 93%. The accuracy level was 93%. They were able to achieve an accuracy level score of 90%, which is fairly accurate for such a large extent. Their model was implemented in a multi-layer perception with 2 hidden layers of 20 nodes each, and has been trained for 1,000 efforts. The accuracy and precision of the model can further increase if we increase the number of hidden layers as well as the number of perception indicators. Now, what I'm trying to say is this: they need so much finance to carry out this analysis to go to hit 100%. They need a very smart system. They need a very large data set. Who was in India? But coming back to Nigeria, we have started something, which is what myself and that's what we're doing now. Our accuracy level has got to 97% accuracy level. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to preempt loan fraud and loan defaults in banking. If you don't go further now, like the other world is doing, our banking sector might come to collapse. So in conclusion, the importance of this project cannot be overemphasized, as banks keep on issuing loans based on CBN directives. Last year, as head of recovering my bank, because of this COVID period, a lot of businesses went delinquent. We gave out loans up to about 400 million. A lot of businesses went delinquent. And we could not do anything about it. The only thing we had to do was to go into those houses, begging them, please come and help, please come and help. If we had used a system like this, as of February, March, when this COVID thing has started, the system would have been able to create and say, if you give us extra amount of loans by June, July, because of the lockdown and everything, these loans will go delinquent. It's as of now that we are able to cover part of those loans. It's not just our bank, it is a nationwide thing, even worldwide. Banks have almost gone under because of delinquent loans. And so, with the use of AI, artificial intelligence, we will achieve a high accuracy score, preempt fraud from happening to the banks, and preempt big loan defaults in the bank. Thank you.
Brother, Mr. Esele, please, before you take your seat, one question for you. Please let's take it back. Very good. Can you step up?
Good afternoon all. Thank you, Mr. Presenter. Now, I have a question that might kind of involve skills. You're talking about machine learning and you're talking about predicting fraud. And you're talking about it in terms of loan applications. And I'm thinking, while you were doing it, I was thinking, I don't think I needed a machine to tell me when the coronavirus lockdown happened, people were not going to work, nobody is working. A lot of people were talking about job security in that time. So it didn't need a machine to actually tell me that people that took loans at that time definitely default. So I'm thinking, aside from the fact that it was a major disaster worldwide, are you saying that the machine learning can predict people that will default outside the coronavirus period? And then, if that is the case, is it possible for it to detect scams that we are seeing now? We are seeing major scams like repetition of MMM. On social media right now, we are seeing, I
I don't even know their names. I'm seeing a couple. One, the guy who used to work in the bank, he stepped down and then said to give out loans. And then so many people invested for him. And they're saying the guy and his wife, they have run out of Nigeria now with about 22 billion naira. Money that Nigerians invested in the business. Even me, I don't even know where those Nigerians got money they invested, because I'm very nice.
We're not just see this money.
30 million, we all not this money. I don't know.
I want to
so
join.
I'm saying, can this machine learning detect this fraud, this type of fraud, aside the one that is maybe directed personally to the bank in terms of loans, and then finance test for analysts? We know that for law, there are two things that make up a crime. We have the men's share and the actor's share. That the mental intention to commit the crime, and then the actor's share, the physical action that the overt act that you put into place to show that you're going to be there. When these two elements are there, you are not committed the crime. So if this machine learning is detecting crimes before the crime is committed, are we not saying now that that crime is an equal crime? Since crime has not actually been committed, how do you not say the person is a criminal? Thank you.
Okay, I'll start with the last one. The act or the act of crime itself. It is when the action has started that the machine is detected. Now, let me break it down so you understand what I'm saying. Sorry. Okay. Now, we have what we call data set. The machine will only know that there's a that you feed the machine with a certain level of data. The data set is carried out from maybe the whole of Benin, if that's what you are researching on, the whole of Benin. Now, when Mr. A tries to log into the system now, he wants to defraud you or anybody, immediately he starts the process of trying to defraud you. Guess what happens? The good thing about artificial intelligence is that even up to your social media account, it has it. All your friends that are connected to you have their accounts. What it does is, in microseconds, it has run an algorithm and saying that Mr. A has committed crime in Ibuzo before, this same crime in Ibuzo before. He has committed this crime in Oluku, he has committed this crime in XYZ. He puts one and two together and maybe those of flag you off. That is for someone that has committed the crime now. Now, for someone that has not committed the crime and is about to start, immediately you start committing the crime. Because it only has a pattern, more than 100,000 data sets have been fed into that computer or that system. Because it doesn't know the pattern of what this crime looks like. It's not taking like a normal computer system now that just feed with information out. Let me try to explain this diagram. No. Good. Now, can I control please? Now, these are the layers. It's called neural network. These are the layers of the network, how it works. Immediately, okay, good. Sorry. So immediately, you start feeding in your information into this thing. You start analyzing it. At this point, it's analyzing it. It analyzes and starts getting a what's called false accuracy level. Yes. It pushes it down to this level, N5 and N6. which is where we now have the deep learning cells. In microseconds, I'm talking about microseconds now. At this point, it has patterned everything. That's why you're seeing everything moving back and forth like that. It has patterned it at this point. At this point, it will be able to tell that Mr. John Ahmed is going to commit this crime at 2 o'clock. That is maybe the process starting from 12 o'clock, 12 p.m. It will tell you that at 2 o'clock, Mr. John is going to commit a crime. The act of committing that crime already, immediately you start the crime already, you are trying to defraud somebody. It's already a crime itself. If you are
the likelihood that you are likely going to commit a crime, please maybe or not go ahead. So as a matter of fact, because the administrator deep learning already has an algorithm of all your form of communication, what you do.
So that you don't go home or you don't go into a transaction and you are dealt with. So that's basically it.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes, the FM business and all those forms of business is actually a concern. If the artificial intelligence is working and advancing crime in global society, why are we not enforcing it there to safeguard the citizens? Why is the government, and I don't know who else is in charge, allowing the masses to invest in these businesses and they end up being frauded? Why are we not doing anything about it? Thank you.
The major issue here is interest and knowledge gap. The present government of the day do not have the capacity or the infrastructure. They don't know what is really happening. And so there is knowledge gap. 2, if you bring in systems like this, we have within our they are the number one perpetrator of this crime. How do they continue to live or continue to bask in this crime? If you reduce the crime, they will not bask in it. So they are one of the major players in it. We wrote to this seminar presented. We wrote to CBN. Myself and my team, we wrote to CBN. We are speaking to them. We are the major handler of all the banks in Nigeria. If you set up this system like this, it will help. But up to now, nobody's forthcoming. So that's where we are. Thank you.
A round of applause for a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. Please, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor and privilege to invite the last speaker of today. Please join me as I most welcome to the podium Dr. Mrs. Georgina Omorigo Erifeta. You're welcome, ma'am. So because of time, I'm supposed to read your profile. Okay? You're already here. Now, thank you very much. Please, a round of applause for her.
Good afternoon, everyone. Director of Excellence, convener, to adopt well graciously established protocol. I feel highly privileged to be called to speak among very important speakers and presenters and standing amongst you all to just ongoing discussion. For me, standing here is homecoming because I did my 3 degrees here. I finished my first degree about 22 years ago from this same great institution, and I tell you the truth is, if I was to be told then that a day will come like this where I will stand to talk with people of this standard, I will definitely doubt. So I feel highly privileged and thank you so much for having me here. Permit me to please return all the glory to my Creator. I am privileged to be listed among the living, and that's why I'm here. So I want to give God praise, the essence of my being, for granting me the grace and the strength to stand before all of you and be part of this discussion. The topic I've been told to handle is COVID-19 pandemic, lessons for forensic science experts and society. A lot has been said already, so I'll try to compress what I have to say as much as possible so that we'll be out of here, especially because we are not taking our lunch, and I expect that postprandial effect is set in very soon. And maybe I will not be talking and most people will be sleeping, but I believe that that will not be the case. So I would like to follow this simple outline. I would like to give a basic introduction, look at COVID-19 pandemic itself, disruption of the COVID-19 pandemic in the world, COVID-19 disruption in Nigeria, Edo State, vaccination, myths and science, information for forensic experts. Just a little information, I'm not a forensic expert, so I just have one little thing, considering that information is unending on the net. Information for the society, then I'll go straight to my conclusion and recommendation. I'd like to highlight the fact that coronavirus is not new. It's been there since the first coronavirus was actually identified in 1960 in China, saying that China has been origin of a lot of infectious diseases and they should be asked questions. I think I told that line too. It was first identified and characterized in 1960. Way after 2002, between 2002 and 2003 was actually called the SARS-CoV-1. It affected about 21 countries, started with 4 countries, affected about 21 countries, yes, it's not on this slide, and caused, infected over 8,000 people with about 774 deaths. So translating that into statistics, you agree with me that that was about 9.67 deaths in just 8 months of the infection. And then the World Health Organization actually notified that the outbreak had commenced and issued a global warning in March 2003. The major part of the outbreak lasted for 8 months, like I said, and right now comparing the confirmed cases and death rates that have emanated from SARS-CoV-2, which is the pathogenic virus responsible for COVID-19, I would say that the percentage death is just like 0.0158% of what we are seeing in SARS-CoV-2. I want to highlight again that SARS-CoV-1 is the pathogen responsible that was responsible for the SARS infection that took place between 2002 and 2003, and SARS-CoV-2, severe acute respiratory syndrome virus, was pathogenic agent responsible for COVID-19. So let's see COVID-2. I would like to put to establish this foundation so that we can be on the same page while we start analyzing the data that is before us. In 2019, the respiratory illness responsible for the popular and ongoing COVID-19 pandemic caused by the virus that was very similar to SARS was discovered, that's called SARS-CoV-2, that was responsible for COVID-19. The coronavirus SARS-CoV-2, at the origin of COVID-19, is said to share more than 70% genetic similarity with SARS-CoV-1. That was at the origin of 2003 SARS. It was first identified in the city of Wuhan. COVID-19 causative agent was first identified again in Wuhan, and the World Health Organization declared its outbreak a public emergency on the 11th of March 2020. SARS-CoV-2, the pathogenic agent for COVID-19, is a positive single-stranded RNA virus. If I say positive single-stranded RNA virus, I mean that the SARS-CoV-2 can actually use the ribosomes of the host person to produce viral proteins that finally leads to the infection, to COVID-19 infection. Let's quickly look at the symptoms. The symptoms from COVID-19 are already established as fever, cough, fatigue, breathing difficulties, and loss of smell and taste. I want to say that these symptoms can actually be easily handled. In fact, one of my recommendations, I said it is necessary for symptoms of COVID-19 to be treated immediately. Because not treating the symptoms was part of the reason why we recorded high levels of percentage death or percentage fatality, because symptoms of COVID-19 were not treated, and they further break down the immune system that could have been responsible in fighting the virus. The complications that I wrote here are actually the complications that led to fatality in COVID-19 infection. And these complications included pneumonia, viral sepsis, acute respiratory failure, pulmonary fibrosis, pediatric multi-system inflammatory syndrome. Those are just a few, but very significant complications that led to increased fatality in the face of COVID-19. Let's take a look at COVID-19 disruption in the world. I would like to say that cumulatively and very pathetic. When I saw this data, I was taken aback. But we'll look at the tables together as I move on this study. As of 17th of October 2021, the global death toll for COVID-19 was over 4 million. While the confirmed cases were just around 240 million, 70,992 cases. That's for the confirmed cases. That brought the fatality rate globally to about 2%, exactly 2.03%. And we have about 98 cities already affected by the virus, and the confirmed cases rose to 241,545,581 cases, with about 4 million plus deaths. I would like to see the trend of, I would like us to see the trend of the infection across the globe. So what we're looking at the epidemiological update of COVID-19 in some selected countries. The first country I have here is China, which was the origin of COVID-19. Data has it that just about 96,000 plus of people were infected with COVID-19 in China. From a total population of over 1 billion, the percentage of that population that was actually affected by this virus was just about 0.006. The total percentage of people affected in China was less than 0.01. I would like to stop here and go to the United States. If I'm looking at this data, I'm not beginning to worry. Is this COVID-19 actually meant to be a biological weapon? Because looking at the data actually got me thinking, In the United States, we have over 44,000 persons affected by the virus out of a population of just 352,000. China had over 1 billion, but the people that were affected, the originator was just about 96,000. While United States had just 333,000 plus population, but over 44 million, 900,000 plus was affected. That brought the cases that were affected by COVID-19 in the United States to be over 13% of their overall population was affected by COVID-19. But China, only 0.06% of the population was affected. The originator of the virus. Going to the United States, the same trend was seen. Over 12% of their population was affected because about 8 million plus people were affected in the United States. But overall, this affects their population size. 12% of their population were affected. Were confirmed to be positive with the infection. So US was 13% of the overall population. United Kingdom was 12% of the overall population, while China was at that very low end. Germany had over 5% of their overall population monthly. How come the originator of the virus had such a low percent of their overall population being affected, while other countries were recording high level of infection? 13% in US, 12% in UK, 5% plus of the population affected in Germany. But in Nigeria, I don't know if this is based on the number of persons that were tested or maybe data unavailability, but data shows it that based on the over 200 million population size of Nigeria, just about 0.98%, less than 0.1% of our population, overall population, was affected by the virus. Ghana is next. Ghana also showed a low infection rate vis-a-vis population size of about 0.4% population affected by the virus. I want us to look at the last column, which is the percentage death rate vis-a-vis confirmed cases. I'm not saying vis-a-vis population size, but vis-a-vis confirmed cases. For China, 4.8% of the people that were confirmed positive died from the COVID-19 virus. But you know what? Very quickly, China was able to have their curve flattened. At the onset of the outbreak, they had this percentage of people, they had this number of persons affected by the virus. But in months, they flattened the curve. But the death rate was very high. That's why their death rate vis-a-vis confirmed cases is 4.8. But in US, if you now want to look at how countries actually fared, from the percentage death rate vis-a-vis confirmed cases, we cannot, notwithstanding we had over 44 million people affected in the US, you can see that it was only 1.6% of these persons that died from the COVID. The population the number of deaths in the US was over 700,000. 724,329. But if you look at these people that were infected, I'm sure their testing was extremely very excellent. People that were infected were over 44 million, and people that died were just around 724,000 people. That's like 1.61% of people confirmed dying from the virus. I think that's excellent compared to other countries. I would not want to say compared to China, because China arrested and brought their curve under control at a very high speed. It's just that when you compare vis-a-vis with confirmed cases, they had a high death toll. So it's not that they were able to bring their infection rates under control, I'm sure death toll would have been far higher than this. So I think that United States actually fared well. United Kingdom had the same trend of death rate vis-a-vis confirmed cases. United States was 1.61, United Kingdom was 1.67, Germany was 2.16. Don't forget that this percentage death rate is placed vis-a-vis confirmed cases. So I use this factor to actually analyze the way countries fared with the infection. Nigeria has an overall percentage fatality rate of about 1.34 because out of the 209,173 cases that were infected by the virus, only about 2,804, less than 3,000 people died from the virus based on available statistics. Ghana is low down there. Ghana, an African country, I want to say at this summit that sincerely understanding the trend of COVID-19 is a little bit very difficult because you find out that the curves don't actually align with regions. You can see a country in Africa behaving like a country in Europe when it comes to trend the virus curve went, and while a European country behaves like one of the African countries. Let's see Ghana. Ghana had a percentage death rate. These are these confirmed cases of 0.90. If you look at all these countries, when it comes to flattening the curve and how they fare, we can give it to Ghana. We can still wonder, what did Ghana do? What did Ghana do? I was thinking in Ghana and I found out that some experts have concluded that the leaders of a particular country, the economic balance, security matters and all that determine actually how countries fare in the course of COVID-19. I think that played out in this report because Ghana fared very well, US also did, but yes, Nigeria overall a percentage death rate of about 1.34. But let's see what happened in our state. I would like us to see what happened in Nigeria, directly in Nigeria, vis-a-vis Edo State. Okay, I put this chart here because of what I was saying. I said that COVID-19 caused like trend. If you have any specific trend based on, you know, there's been a recent fact or now that climatic situation actually determines the trend of COVID-19. That was not this chart. The climatic situation did not determine the trend of COVID-19. If you look at Burkina Faso having a trend like what we saw in Italy, while Ghana had a trend like what we saw in the US. So, data available to us, climatic situation did not actually determine the cause that were demonstrated by COVID-19 infection. I would like to just skip and go to looking at the Nigerian states and some of the states and how we actually fare. Another data that got me amazed was the percentage death rate vis-a-vis confirmed cases in Edo State. When compared to Lagos State, FCT Abuja, Edo State had the highest percentage death rate vis-a-vis confirmed cases. What did we not do right? What went wrong? We had the same percentage death vis-a-vis confirmed cases, like the one that was demonstrated in South Africa. It was shocking for me because I actually thought that we did very well. But with data available to us, we found out that Edo State has like the highest percentage death rate vis-a-vis confirmed cases among these states that we tried to do a comparison. I would like to quickly go into vaccination. I wrote here that vaccination delivers viral antigens to trigger immune responses without causing the disease. Immune responses are actually the responses that enables a living being to be able to fight against non-self invaders in the system. But how come vaccination is a problem? How come we have no rate of vaccination in our country and in Edo State, and it's now tending towards the government mandating individuals to go do their vaccination? We're going to look at all that. COVID-19 vaccine is intended to provide acquired immunity against severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus. Acquired immunity
I mean immunity that will lead to the generation of antibodies through the humoral immune system, and will also be able to trigger the cell-mediated responses that will stimulate the synthesis of cells that will help the immune system respond to infection in the system. COVID-19 vaccine-induced responses are similar to that in natural infection. Why are we not taking it? Global vaccination progress data show that about 36.2% are taking the two doses, while about 47.8% are taking only the third doses. But let's look at the case of Nigeria. In Nigeria, only 1.5% of our citizens, of our population, are taking the two doses. 1.5% of over 200 million people are taking the two doses, and just about 3.3% are taking the first dose. So if the vaccination has been a lifelong intervention for the treatment of viruses and foreign invaders, why are we not taking to it? But do you know what I would like to do? I would like to align one of the speakers that said that Nigerians believe that they have more complicated problems than trying to intervene in the processes that will flatten out the curve with COVID-19. I think that was a true picture the last presenter was just trying to speak to us, but I think there are ways forward. I would like us to quickly look at some myths and signs. There's one I wrote here, spraying and introducing bleach and other disinfectants will not protect against COVID-19. Sincerely, the timely and only and positive intervention for intervening in COVID-19 infection now is vaccination. Vaccination for COVID-19, I'm not part of the school of thought that believes that it will cause more harm than good. I feel that COVID-19 infection and its symptoms and complications are more dreadful and more terrible than the symptoms that might emanate from COVID-19 vaccination. So going and trying out other alternatives is actually not going to help our country. So that's the first myth. I don't understand why people would think that bleach that will further bring down your immune system that is supposed to intervene and respond to COVID-19 infection and cause more harm to you. I saw another myth here that said that adding pepper to your soup and other meals, because I'm actually supposed to highlight some needs for the society to be able to trade with. It says adding pepper to your soup and other meals will protect against COVID-19. That is not possible. COVID-19 is a viral infection and cannot be, I don't know what pepper can do. Pepper can give you some level of warmness. But I can't actually interrelate the benefit of pepper, eating pepper with the onset of COVID-19 infection. And there's another saying that 5G mobile networks are able to spread COVID-19. That is not possible because even COVID-19 cannot survive around 5G networks. It cannot survive around 5G networks, so it's not possible. The infection itself. A COVID-19 virus can spread through hot and humid climates. I've already shown us a chart that has debunked that information. Cold weather and snow can help protect against COVID-19. This is not possible because COVID-19 has not demonstrated any kind of specific trend when it comes to infection. COVID-19 virus cannot spread through mosquito bites. Some persons believe that COVID-19 virus can spread through mosquito bites. Mosquito bites, mosquitoes are totally different from pathogenic agents that are responsible for COVID-19. And finally, I said ultraviolet lamps should not be used to disinfect hands and other. In fact, a lot of persons in global society actually of course, was just a myth and had no scientific backing. The little information here I have for forensic experts is we're told that the COVID-19 variants were more virulent than the initial one that started in 2019. So if DNA and genomic sequencing is continued in Nigeria, I see us ensuring that the pandemic is stopped and the infection or the cause of the infection. Remains crucial in the monitoring of the evolution of COVID-19 and identifying variants of concern, giving room for adequate, timely intervention. I would like to say that following COVID-19 guidelines and protocols is primarily for your safety, and it benefits you before any other person. Hand hygiene is the most important measure to prevent the spread of infections among patients and healthcare practitioners. SARS-CoV-2, the considered agent for COVID-19, can remain variable in the air for hours and on surfaces for several days. So it is important that World Health Organization guidelines are followed for our own good to try to contain the spread of COVID-19. Once you have been, it is the heart of self-survival and protect the human body from all kinds of invaders. While the pandemic lasts and even after, the body's immune system must be constantly engineered to deliver maximally by focusing on non-balanced diet and it's important that everyone does whatever they can to stimulate their immune system. One of my professors once told me that the more colorful a meal is, the more healthy it is. Because if your meals are properly loaded with multivitamins from your balanced diet consumption, everything you need to have synthesize your multivitamins that are needed to stimulate your immune system and help manage the infection. Will just be in
new way to draw funds to themselves. So I let you know you've done very well. We need to work with people like you. And because this person has trained you, and I'm impressed that you truly from this university, and you are coming back to give to your alma mater some knowledge that you acquired from here. So we'll work with you. The University of Good Data will look at them. I don't believe in any of those conspiracies, even if it's national conspiracy. If this virus is tricky, take one and bring this, go and do this. You need to, why do you not bring this? You need to take and bring this, you can do it. So all those means, you are told us everything. Are we ready for the kind of person?
Yes.
And so please don't bear with us. Okay, good. So the kind of person will be the last person that will just call it a day, please. Okay, but while I'm coming, you can ask.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor. Please, before we connect to the person on Zoom, if you have questions for our lecturer, please kindly do that now. We have questions.
We have to thank you specially for finding this time. I know how short it was for me to approach you to take up this lecture, and she has done marvelously well. So thank you very much. So being a biochemist, which I know you are, and I happen to belong there. I think this is the first time we are using RNA intervention for vaccination. And a lot of people are skeptical. So you find that they're a little bit scared. That's why when they say enforced vaccination, some of us are still, I'm a biochemist. I still do. I say, wow. So how do you now want to? Can you just give us a little more enlightenment? You know, to reassure that there is no subsequent harm. Because this is an intervention now that is going into RNA. So as a biochemist, you know what I'm talking about. So please can you give us a little more enlightenment? Thank you.
My question is, it possible for RNA vaccines to cause future damage in cells and in humans? The answer cannot be a total yes or no, but from scientific studies, what I expect RNA vaccines to do is actually to go into the system, possibly use the ribosomes, produce viral proteins that will be presented to the cells as viral antigens, and this will now lead the human cells to synthesize immune cells, like memory cells, that will attack a future infection from the actual virus. So if it's an RNA vaccine, all you expect is that the mRNA is going to select a protein, and what protein is going to synthesize? It is going to synthesize proteins from its RNA that the cells are going to see as foreign. And once the cells see it as foreign, what it does is to elicit an immune response that will cause the acquired immune system to be activated. It means the humoral antibody system will be activated. Then the cell-mediated responses will be activated. Cells and proteins will be synthesized. Memory cells will be synthesized, awaiting a future and actual or real-time infection. So that's how you see it. Even if there were DNA vaccines, that gives us a little more concern. But if there are mRNA vaccines, from my scientific background, I think that they are relatively safe. Thank you.
Come on this camera.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Olara Betausi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So it's now your turn. Please join me as I welcome Dr. Olara Betausi to his lecture on a paper on forensic evaluation of alkali-rich fractions of Carica papaya leaf extraction. Please, Dr. Fitz Owolafe, can you please take off from here? Thank you very much.
Rightly presented earlier. I would like to share my slide.
Yes, you are very loose, right? Yeah, you can share your slide now.
Good afternoon once again. My name is Dr. Olara from Nigerian Police Academy in Kano. I'm here to present my paper on forensic evaluation of alkali-rich fraction of Carica papaya leaf extract used as a practice substance using LCMA and SCMS analysis, spectrophotometry analysis. In the line of my presentation, I will take the outline, introduction, materials and methods, results and discussion, and conclusion. Introduction. Therapeutic substance is now a big menace in Nigeria and all over the world. As we have seen what Professor Barry explained to us, the trend and how it's killing us all over the world. Therapeutic substances or compounds are also called psychotropic, and the term
refers to any chemical compound or substance, either non changes a person's mental state by affecting the way they like next. Crystal compounds of natural products are vastly structural diverse, and their structures or sources are majorly plants, animal, and microorganisms. But plants have been the major source, with over 300 plant species repeated for activity. Most do not focus on these plants because it's either they are used in the suburb or in the rural areas. The World Health Organization in 2001, in their drug part, say that over 0.5 million deaths are now attributed to illicit drugs annually. Also, the genetic shows that by 2030 it's going to be about 11% increase. And there's need for concerted efforts to control this group, because the youth, the need to control this group can never be overemphasized. Carica papaya fruit is well known to all of us for its medicinal value, while its leaves are also used for folklore medicine. Also, scientific reports are available confirming the bioactivity of this leaf, but the psychoactive potential are not well researched into. Some of the reports about the psychoactive potential first came out by a researcher by the name Oli. He reported that dry leaves of Carica papaya are being used in rural areas and towns as psychoactive substance. Also, Okoli in the same year 2007 mentioned it in his Ethno Botanical Survey. In 2012, Oyewole and Owoyele reported that this particular plant can have a neurobehavioral effect when it is smoked, and this research will not actually give us or implicate any of the vital consequences. And it brings out our aim that the aim of this study is to investigate the toxic effect of the alkaloid fraction extract of Carica papaya. And the specific objectives are to extract alkaloids, which consequence to determine the toxic effect and to identify which of the phytochemicals or the alkaloids are present in the compound. The materials and methods the plant was obtained from Abuja in Gwari area, because here in Kano it is not a common plant that is grown. Also, the plants the seeds were prepared by frying in shade for 6 days, and the leaves were pulverized. So this is a schematic diagram of how alkaloid extracts were obtained using the Sarkozo method. Results. First, what we did was to actually know whether the alkaloid extract is toxic, and we carried out a branching mechanical assay, and we found out that 14.81 microgram per mil was the leader concentration, and according to the Mayer standard, this is referred to as a highly toxic compound. Also, we looked at the antioxidant capacity using the BPA scavenger activity, and our ICCC was 0.287 microgram per mil, showing a low activity into an LCMS to actually identify which of the phytochemicals are present. And this is our chromatogram, the LCMS chromatogram, and this is what we are able to get. Actually, our LCMS analysis in Nigeria here, we do not have an institution that has a library. But Bayero University was able to get a new LCMS and we make use of this. Because most of the LCMS analyses that have been put on in the country have been taken out to do. So they were able to get the library, but because we do not get the library, we use the respect particular library to actually identify which of the particular we are able to can be get from the results we had with our LCMS. And this is our result. We have nuclearin, Indo-3 acetaldehyde and we also have metacapine, alpha-tocopherol, and gadolinium, methyl ester. Apart from this, other basic we are not able to have anything using the database. Also, we look at the quantity in order to identify either the compound is alkaloid or not. We use the intensity that from the analysis, and we are able to find out that our compound or our fraction is about 70% alkaloid. This is the structure of the compound that we are able to identify. Nuclearin, being one of the alkaloids that was identified, was also found in some other plants, like nucleophorol. Also, they are found in Inovine domestica fruits and some other plants. But what was the implication of this? Nuclearin, which is also known as eginolene, is used in by athletes in order to improve their strength. And what does this compound do? One of the things is expand the airway of the lungs and also improves the smooth, also helps in improving the smooth muscles of the blood vessels, allowing for increase in oxygen intake and flow within the system. This aids activity of athletes. And this is also done, the compound also is reported to activate the beta-adrenergic receptor, which aids the smooth muscle relaxation during activity. And prolonged use of this particular compound has been known to have an adverse effect, causing abnormal rhythmic activity of the heart, which can lead to other dangerous things. But Indo-acetyl acid is another alkaloid that was found, but most of the research, most of the literature research has not given any activity relating to cytotrophic. We believe that this particular compound or combination of this compound may be what is responsible for the psychoactivity, because we found from research alkaloids are one of the major compounds or natural compounds that exhibit psychoactivity in plants. And based on this result, based on our results from this study, we believe that the fractions of carica papaya leaves are toxic and may be contributor to the psychoactivity observed by smoking of the dry leaf. These are some of our references. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ularafe. I'm very sure we'll have questions for you. Please let me ask the audience who have questions. Please let's simplify to ask about just for fun. If I got you right, I didn't say publicity research or work. I was going to something else. Dr. Ularafe, yeah?
Hello? Yes. I cannot hear you.
Okay, please, can you come back to me? Just hold on a while.
What? Yeah, hello. I cannot hear you very well.
Yeah, to ask the question again. Thank you so much for the presentation. My question is,
in the conclusion of your paper presentation, you said that the alkaloid richness of the possibly results in the toxicity observed which cause the psychoactive behavior. So my question is, during the presentation of the paper, I didn't see any toxicity test or toxicity that was carried out on that particular leaf extract.
Okay, sir. What we are actually pointing at is that we believe that alkaloid as one of the major compounds in plants that are involved in psychoactivity. But what we are saying is that based on the report, most of the papers we are seeing regarding this plant, the abuse of this plant in psychoactivity is basically by psychology. So we are looking at it from the perspective that it could be the alkaloid. So we actually want to identify which of the alkaloid is actually present in the plant. One. Secondly, the inocularine that we are talking about, is even a banned substance for athletes because it aids their activity. And reports have been shown that this particular compound has a side effect on users of this plant. And we believe that this alkaloid, along with some other components of the plant, when the dry sample is smoked, may be the factor that is contributing or probably the reason why Areca papaya leaf is carrying out a psychotropic activity. That was our own view. And we believe that there is still more work to be done because it is an ongoing trend. What we intend to do next is to actually use this alkaloid fraction along for an analysis where we can expose them to animals and see what effect it will give on the psychomotor and other parameters which can be used to actually pinpoint that they are actually causing the psychoactivity we are talking about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any other questions? Okay, there's no other questions. Dr. Ogunrafe, we sincerely appreciate you. Thank you very much. Please, can we give him a round of applause? So this, ladies and gentlemen, will take us to
very important announcement. Yesterday today, Central Reform Adult Section. Look at slide, look at the class. Tomorrow, don't see another look at slide of the class. I got it before. I think it's very important that we are. The only one who may not do extra needs of what the chairman said is Professor Olayiwola. Like 15 minutes on that survival program talk. Then to prayer is just 10 minutes or so. So what we are doing, the children will have it all the way. And you will also be part of what I call moral judge. The real judge will appointed. Moral judge will judge the judge. Because the hunter is not haunted. And the hunter is not haunted, the hunter is not haunted. So it is very important that I said to help us on the hunters. And after that, beautiful certificate will be issued. We are not wasting time in this certificate. No. LOC have made sure that the certificates are ready, they are being signed. So tomorrow, certificate will be given out after the program. After that, the outcome. Let's try and come early. Because we will really come early. We are thank God that members come and the early stage because the video is very, very disaster. And we hope that tomorrow we will flow Well, once again, I want to appreciate the patient so that one place on one minister is not easy, especially when they are not any special about hospitals. But to remember, on the fact of them, you cannot say to me non-action. If not, nothing comes from your organization in different dimensions. See somebody talk from somebody talk from Kano, somebody talk from Africa, somebody talk from America. So, for us to compound all this together and package it, it's not something that is so simple. But most important, the hardest task is your patient, and that patient is very so simple. It's not easy to spend one place. And you are not intentional, and you are free to go to the organization group. Once again, we really appreciate it.
This is another applause for my director. That's the Center Director, Center of Forensic Programs and History. This is a gentleman, very most welcome, the LOC chairman, to give the vote of thanks, Dr. Mrs. Victoria Mokwe.
Thank you. Good afternoon, my participants. I know it's been a hectic day. We really had a lot to go in. So thank you for your patience, and I'm sure you have actually get a lot too. So it is a privilege once more to be alive to be here in a bit of time and for you to be participating. So the Vice Chancellor, I beg to start on a distinct protocol. We wish to give our special thanks to our keynote speaker, international keynote speaker, Professor Barry Logan. It was a very interesting talk he took us through, and I'm sure we all benefited from it. Then Justice Okaye, who sat down here for quite a long time and really enjoyed the session, she could not give a speech today, but has promised that tomorrow she will be with us. So we wish to express our thanks to her for the patience. She has promised that tomorrow she's going to be here. You can imagine what it is. A justice of the High Court, she's spending the whole day with us. So thank you very much. So our plenary speakers, 4 of them we have Professor Gozie Ogodo, Professor Ernest Udiabe, Professor Celestine Iraro, and Dr. Georgina Erikesa. You must agree with me that their lectures were quite enriching. Very, very enriching. It's unfortunate I was moving about, so we wish to thank. After discussion, we took 3 of them today. From Mr. Sunday Momo, then Mr. Eseye, and Mr. Owolara, who is the last speaker now. Mr. Momo took us through the journey of our bread and what we eat. The one that contains promise. Okay, it's unfortunate that we're talking about. It's okay, thank you. I heard we have been enlightened on how we can know the ones that contain promise. So thank you very much for your performance. Then to the participants. If people we are talking and they were not guests, how will it be? So you, the participants, have done more, I think, than even those who gave us the picture. Because you're giving a talk and the crowd is not there. So what have you benefited? Nothing. So thank you very much for your patience. And I hope we have been able to enrich you, your knowledge, successfully. Thank you very much. Then to God who made it possible, we, of course, we don't owe him all honor and glory. The ICT crew, you have been wonderful. So thank you very much. The CET in my head, CET, then those on the microphone, please, thank you very much. We appreciate it. So I don't want to keep you because I know we have had a long day and we are all tired. We hope to see you tomorrow. Tomorrow is the essay competition, just like Prof has said. The children are doing wonders. We had a tip of the eye yesterday. So you are going to see the live action tomorrow. So make sure you don't miss out. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We hope to see you tomorrow. Thanks a lot.
Last but not the least, it's time for us to reporting for today. Please join me as I welcome Dr. Erufeta to help us with the closing prayer. Please, over to you.
Amen. Our most gracious God, I want to appreciate you for the time you have spent here today. Thank you for all the successful deliberations. Thank you for all the speakers. Thank you for the participants. Thank you for the peace that you have granted us in all the sessions. Thank you for all that you have done in the course of the conference. Thank you for the conveners. Thank you for the wisdom that was in place, Lord God, in the course of this conference. Father, we ask, Lord, that as we go, you go with every one of us in the name of Jesus. And we convene us here tomorrow and cause the proceedings tomorrow to be more successful in the mighty name of Jesus.
Amen.
Thank you, Lord, for everything. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Baby, you'll never be the one. God said, I tell you,